does this mean we can have chapters? And no, not in the short fiction we're talking about today. No. And I will make that distinction as well, because there's a difference between a short story, a novella, or a novelette. And specifically what we're talking about today as a short story is a contained story, usually that people can do in one sitting. A novelette and a novella can have chapters. A short story can't necessarily. And I'll show you why in my method that is the case. Of course, there's always ways to break the rules, but I'm sure you'll find what I find when we get going here in just a minute. All right. All right, everybody, we're going to get started because I can't wait, and it's 3 minutes until 1:30, and a lot of people are here, so let's do this. Hello, welcome to Asset Economy, a short fiction workshop. My name is Sapha Burnell. I am a best-selling cyberpunk and mythpunk author of multiple novels, short story collections, and poetry collections. So we will go over my body of work in just a minute so you can have more information about that. You can see all of what I do at saphaburnell.com, and that has more information on myself and my pedigree and everything else that I've done, including ways to hire me to run workshops and do things with, online and in person with yourself and your fellow authors. How is my voice? Am I okay if I am speaking this quiet? Do I need to get a little closer to the mic, or am I good? Voice good? Thank you, Jute. Thank you so much. All right. So today we are talking about asset economy, and there's a lot I mean by that. I'm being heteroglossic. I'm having multiple meanings when it comes to that, including economy of narration and economy of narrative, but also the difference kind of between writing fiction for various markets. And so, okay, come on. Let me just... Okay, there's an ad break that's just going to start in a minute, and so I'm just going to make sure that I am good here on everything. I don't want to start anything in the middle of an ad break, so I'll be just a second. Let me just click that off for a minute, just to... Okay. There we go. We're good. This is my disclaimer, and disclaimer is incredibly important when it comes to our way of just kind of approaching short fiction today. This workshop is one method of many in the development of short fiction. Please take what is valuable and let the rest flow down the river. No one editor, author, or reader has the perfect method. Nobody does. What works perfectly for one person may not work at all for somebody else, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. What I mean to do here is to give a few approaches and some information, and hopefully some of that sticks, and other things might not stick, and that's okay. I am totally fine with that. I hope you take what resonates with you and leave the rest behind, just like any advice you might get from writers, authors, editors, and anyone within the sphere. I think it's an incredibly important thing to remind yourself right at the get-go that nobody's perfect, and nobody has the perfect way of doing things. And that is the beautiful part of the way things go. So please take what resonates and then leave the rest behind. But please do give this a try. Please give it that old college try, as they say. And when we do our workshopping sections, there's going to be several moments of this where we're going to spend 5 minutes or 10 minutes doing a sprint and then come back and present what we found and things like that. It's audience participation is part of this. What I ask is is that one, you only present what you're comfortable presenting, and two, that you be gentle with each other during workshopping. Unless you know that person incredibly well, it can be incredibly difficult through a chat box on the internet to figure out whether or not somebody is, you know, cool or groovy with some kind of critique and not another. So we're all in different places. Please ask. If you don't know that person well, please ask them. Be like, hey, are you looking for this kind of critique? Are you looking for that kind of critique? What if I do this? Is that okay? You know, just give them a little heads up and they will let you know what their comfort level is. And that goes for telling me where your comfort level is as well. And so that's one way that we can just kind of help each other have a positive experience. Because I know for certain people, like, you know, we've got Daz here, and Daz is wonderful, and Daz is a battle axe when it comes to critiques. Daz wants it hard and heavy. They grab their, you know, tinfoil hat and their shield, and she just goes for it, you know, and she asks me many times, just do it. Just rip off the Band-Aid. Just give me the best, like the harshest critique. I can take it. Daz is also a military veteran with years of experience in this world. So for her to be able to say, yeah, dude, bring it on. Come on. Yeah, you are you are very nice in comparison to the drill sergeants I've known in my life. Like, so for somebody like Daz, I'm just going to be like, whoa, dude, no, go back and do that again. Like, what are you talking about? For somebody that I've never experienced before in this environment, I am going to hold back. I am going to ask a lot more questions. I'm going to ensure that certain things, yeah, I've been shot at with real bullets. I can take it. You know, and I'm going to make sure that, you know, the people are comfortable. And I know there's an ad break going on right now. There will be a few ad breaks while this is happening. That is just the nature of Twitch. So I will make sure that I keep, you know, certain more important things for when the ad is not going on. But I did want to explain that. So basically take everything at your comfort level and we'll go from there. And come on. I'm gonna put this up for a few minutes. I moved my entire thing for this. Okay, we got 36 seconds left on that ad break. This is what we're going through today. So we're going to do an introduction to short fiction. We're going to do a history of short fiction, just a very condensed history of short fiction. We are going to talk about readers and audience, and then economy of assets. And you'll see more of what I'm talking about when it comes to that as we keep going. We are going to talk about world building in miniature, characters plus exercises, setting plus exercises, plot plus exercises, workshopping, keeping to your assets, and revision. And then we'll have room for discussion there as needed. So, welcome back, everybody who is there on an ad break. This is what we're going through today. This is the sort of compendium of everything that's going to be happening. And I'm just going to start diving right in. As I said, there is a printable. So if you want the printable, you can, if you are a Twitch subscriber, a Ko-fi or Substack member, and then the printable is available for you in the Discord server and also on Ko-fi and on Substack. And then you can also purchase it off my website, saphaburnell.com, if you like to support what I'm doing here in providing education for anybody who wants to come and watch the stream. A little bit about me. This is me. My name is Sapha Burnell. I'm a Cyberpunk and Mythpunk author. I am also somebody with 15 years of experience in the publishing sphere, both as an author and as an editor and as an executive for various companies creating media. So I do have executive experience from the board level all the way down to the slush pile. I have small press and lit journal experience as an editor. I was an editor of 2 literary journals for more than 10 years. And so when I'm speaking about small presses, when I'm speaking about literary journals and creating short stories, especially for the market, when you're shipping them off to the literary journal market or the e-zine or the magazine market, I'm speaking as somebody who's done this for over a decade. So, some of the stuff I'm saying, it is Canadian. You know, I am a Canadian author and a Canadian editor, so some things are a little bit, you know, Canadian content when it comes to that. But I am speaking from the experience that I have had. So, yes, yeah, Canadian. I am a member of the Writers Union of Canada, and I also served on the National Council of the Writers Union of Canada for 3 years. And I love the Writers Union of Canada. It's just a fantastic organization that is protecting writers' rights, copyright, that's also protecting freedom of speech, and is also giving a platform and a voice for marginalized writers across our True North Strong and Free. And so a lot of resources are available on Writers Union of Canada on the writersunion.ca website. And if you are a member, then those resources, of course, are usually free. If you are not a member, you can purchase things off of the Writers Union of Canada website, including a couple of incredible booklets on things like promotions for authors, marketing books, self-publishing, you know, working with editors. All of those booklets are available at writersunion.ca. This is not sponsored. I am just a member and I love them. My books include Neon Lieben, which was my first bestseller. That one is a cyberpunk novel, and it is book 1 of the Lieben cycle. And then I've got Judge of Mystics, books 1 and 2, Char and Dash and Son of Abel, Macabre and Monstrous, where I published the short story The Lamia, and Whiskey and Sinner's Blood, which is a novella. And then I'm also appearing in Lenses with my stories Cage Wire and The Cottonmouth Smile. They were also published in Futures Lens and Warped Lens. I also have Usurper Kings, which is where I get my name. That was my very first published, like full-on large-scale work. And that was published in 2014 because I was an editor before I was an author. And it is a book of poetry. I've also had short fiction and poetries published in over 40 magazines and literary journals across my career. And as an editor, I edited memoir, science fiction, and fantasy, poetry and prose, including a international best-selling memoir by a prominent West African anti-corruption just speaker, an incredible man. So if you want more information on anything like that, you can go to saphaburnell.com and take a look at that. So that's a little bit about me. Hopefully you find yourself in fairly good hands with that. If not, well, you know, thanks for all the fish. All right. What is a short story? I feel like Daz was asking me this question earlier, and I'm just going to start in on what short fiction is. Here we go. Short fiction is defined as a brief fictional prose narrative which relies on economy of narrative, character, and setting. While not as complex as the novel, novella, or even novelette, a short story ought to feel complete or satisfying by the end. So a novel is something over 40,000 words. And when I'm giving you these word count limits, what I'm giving you is sort of the sort of overarching standard in the publishing industry. A novel is something over 40,000 words. Novels are by far the predominant fiction form. So think of going into a bookstore. And you can see, you know, there's usually the little, you know, tchotchkes and different things they're selling. Oh, look, a blanket. Nice. And then they've got some nonfiction on one side, kid stuff maybe at the back or somewhere else. And then usually when you're looking at those stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks of books, most of them are novels. Novels are by far easier to sell. By far, they are more predominant in publishing, especially in the traditional and small press publishing spheres. And they take up the most of an actual brick and mortar bookstore. And so novels are kind of that big overarch. And then we've got the novella, the novelette, the short story, the flash fiction, and then microfiction. So a novella is something that's usually between 17,000 and 40,000 words. Think something like The Old Man and the Sea. The Old Man and the Sea by Hemingway is about 26,000 words. And so that is well within the realm of novella. Novelettes which are tinier versions, are between about 7,000 words and 17,000 words. If at first you don't succeed, try again is a fantastic novelette if you're looking for something that kind of exemplars the form and was published in the last 10 years. If at first you don't succeed, try again is very, very, very worth the read. Novelettes and novellas are more of what you're going to be seeing in an independent publishing sphere or in some small press spheres. So they are definitely something to kind of keep in mind when you're considering that. What we are looking at today is the short story. A short story is usually between 1,500 words and 7,500 words. Think something like A Very Old Man with Enormous Wings by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. That one is under 3,000 words, and if you have not read it, it is available to read online, and I thoroughly suggest you do. It is one of the best introductions to magic realism and 20th century fiction that exists. And it was originally written in a language other than English, but the translations, everything, oh my goodness, it's so good. So we were looking at the short story today. Flash fiction is something that's under 1,500 words. Riddle by Amadén is fantastic. You can look that one up online as well and read that. I believe it was posted initially in an online magazine. So that is available to read too. And then microfiction is something, like the very short stories. It's their tweet-sized kind of fiction that you could get under 100 words. You're telling a story in 6 words, that kind of thing. That's called microfiction. When I was working as an editor for a prose and poetry literary journal, we rarely considered stories beyond 5,000 words, even though our submissions guidelines at the time were, something closer to 8 at the top end. But just due to the size of the journal and the amount of submissions we received, it wasn't tenable for us to be able to spend 10,000 words on one person. And depending on whether you intend to shop a story on the literary journal market or self-publish / serialize, the word count for lit journals trend to be less than 7,500. They trend to be less than 8,000 words. So I would take a look at that, and we are going to take a look at that. And so the short fiction lengths are really dictated by consensus within the publishing community, traditional and small press, submissions guidelines, and self-publishing word count minimums for ebook and print. As far as I am aware, the most standard self-publishing word count minimums include around 3,000 words for a project minimum on an ebook and about 10,000 words minimum on a print. And so that can come into consideration depending on whether or not you are creating these stories for a market of publishing them yourself, as a self-published person, or whether you're putting them on the literary journal market. Independent publishing is the new renaissance of the novella and novelette, hands down. By independent, I mean self-published and then some small presses. Due to their high overhead and historical low profit margins reducing their appearance in traditional publishing. To be honest, novellas and novelettes are just too expensive to produce for a traditional publisher for too small a turnaround. The profit margins with novella and novelette, because you also have to consider that they are priced lower than a novel, are actually quite low. Which means that if you are in the independent publishing sphere, it's something that's more tenable for you, because a lot of us who are self-publishing are, pardon me, are taking on a lot of that work ourselves. We are taking on the cost. We are taking on, finding that editor and figuring out the layouts and things like that. So we don't have the same costs that, a larger publisher might have. Because we're kind of owning that cost ourselves. Now, when you're taking on the sole amount of cost to produce a novelette or novella, the profit margin can be smaller and still eventually break even, or even become another credit and marketing tour to bring readers into your author brand for a low starting fee. Now, I am not necessarily the kind of person who would give away a lot for free when it comes to published writing. A short story, absolutely yes. An entire novella, I'm going to charge at least, something for it. And there's, just kind of looking at the psychology of marketing and the psychology of kind of people owning something and coming in to hold something dear. When I was also working for another business where the kind of divergence came of, well, do we offer XYZ for free and then see if we can't get that person to later pay for it? Or do we make them pay something and then try and upsell them later? And almost every single time, it was far more effective for us to charge that small amount and then get them to upsell later than it was if you give somebody something away for free. They expect that usually it will remain free. So short fiction is a good way to kind of add that freebie in there if you want to. But something like a novelette or a novella, I would at least, have it available for a couple of bucks. I would at least put it out there for, you sign up for my, sign up for my newsletter and then you'll get this. They have to do something for it. And yes, this is more of the business of short fiction, but we're going to go through the business of short fiction and then we're going to get into writing it as well. So I'm just going to close. Oh, goody, it's snowing. That's wonderful. Pardon me. How am I doing? Am I going too slow, too fast? What do you think? All right. So I will eventually get around to talking specifically about novellas and novelettes via an article on my Substack. And then today we're going to focus on narratives basically under 8,000 words. So if you are not subscribed to my Substack, I have both free and paid subscriptions available on Substack. The article that I will be writing about novellas and novelettes will be free. I usually do that. All right. Anybody have any questions about the length of short fiction? Anybody? Okay. And there will be time for questions at the end too. All right. Let's talk from a self-publishing perspective. Self-publishing novellas and novelettes. When you're taking on the sole amount of cost, you can, your profit margin, your break-even level with self-publishing is actually lower than it is for a traditional press. A traditional press usually employs multiple people. They have to make sure that everybody gets, their wage. They have to make sure that everybody can make a living off of what they're doing, or at least help with making a living off of what they're doing. And then they usually, in order for that to be tenable, they have to make sure that whatever they're putting forward can sell enough to break even fairly quickly. Because otherwise they're just going to run out of time and money before they've even begun. And this is why a lot of small presses have, a lifespan. They really do. Now, a novella or a novelette, even a longer piece of short fiction, can become another credit and marketing tool to bring readers into your author brand for a low starting fee. So one thing that I love to do with a short story, a novella, or a novelette, I love to put it within the same world as a massive cycle that I'm doing, like the Lieben cycle. I'm doing 9 novels for that series, and I'm doing several short stories over a period of time that I will be releasing, including the story Cagewire, which was published in Future's Lens and is available currently right now. It's within the world, but it's something that, if people don't necessarily know if they want to commit to 9 novels, they can read that short story and they can get a very good indication of my style. They can get an indication of my style, my tone, what to expect in my fiction, all of that in a smaller package. And so when it comes to creating a novella, a novelette, or a short story as a marketing tool, it might not break even financially for the amount of time you put in to write and produce it. But as a marketing tool, it's something that you can easily kind of push forward and be like, well, if you want to know more about my work, you can read it right here. Is this up your alley? Yes or no? If it is, great. If it's not, I probably know somebody you would like better. And I think, just as speaking as an editor and also as a novelist and as an author, I'm not offended when I figure out that somebody likes a genre outside my work. No, that's great news, because I know it's okay to be like, you know what? I know somebody that you might like. It's my friend over here that writes a different kind of fiction. Oh, really? You won't try and sell me on yours? No, I don't want you to read mine because it's not your thing. I want you to read your thing. And then that way, that person can go, oh my gosh, Sapha Burnell told me that Neon Lieben is not what I, somebody who reads nothing but historical romance, should read. Oh, wow. You know what? I know somebody that likes sci-fi. They should read Neon Lieben. And I'm going to read this historical romance novel that she told me was really good. That is awesome branding, and that is an awesome way to kind of band together as authors who are not in competition, but in kind of community. You know, being able to be like, okay, so you like mysteries. Okay, you like mystery novels. Mine are not mysteries. You're welcome to read them. But if you like mystery novels, I know you would love Chuck Bowie's. Chuck Bowie, he is a Atlantic Canadian author, writes a ton of mysteries. Donovan for Hire is one of his main ones. You'll love it. Oh, wow. Thank you so much. So that kind of marketing tool is worth its weight, because what you want to do is you want to find out where your readers are and getting somebody to read a short story and go, yeah, that's my thing. Or to go, wow, you know what? That was really creative. You didn't like it. It wasn't my thing. Okay. I want to know in a short story. I don't want to have to make them read an entire, 100,000 word novel in order for them to figure that out. I want to figure that out a little earlier. So that's another reason why short fiction is such a great resource for all of us. Now, in the traditional and small press publishing, short stories live in the literary journal market. So one of the best ways to break into the traditional and small press publishing market is to write short stories. And there's a couple reasons for this. Number one, the literary journal market is thriving. People are still producing literary journals, both as e-zines and as print and digital. The move to digital is fairly significant. So, even Martha Stewart Living, the magazine, it's no longer in print because they've moved everything digital, because that's where things have gone in the literary journal market and in the magazine market. That's okay, but there is still a thriving community within that market. And that means you get to trial things out in a smaller amount of time. When you're pitching a novel to a traditional publisher, you are pitching a relationship that will continue for multiple years, potentially 5 or more. So how you figure out where your boundary lines are, what you're looking for, what kind of genre you want to go into, all of that is best done through writing short fiction and then experimenting. Getting it out there, throwing it out into the literary journal market, trying to find places to publish short fiction, because short fiction is a few months of time, whereas a novel is a few years. So learn thyself. Learn what you want and learn what you want from your publishers and your editors by writing short fiction. It means, too, that you get to kind of learn in a lower stake environment those interactions between an acquisitions editor and an actual content editor, what's going to happen with the line art, what's going to happen with different visuals and things like that, and then the experience of actually getting a work distributed. You get to learn that in microcosm, and that is incredibly valuable. That's incredibly valuable. You get to kind of test things out and figure out how to be professional within this sphere. And when it comes to then attempting to publish a novel in a traditional or small press environment, whether you are going towards agents or you're going straight to whatever trad press, does not require an agent, wherever you are submitting that larger scale manuscript, all of a sudden you've got a couple of years experience in dealing with acquisitions editors, looking at contracts, distribution, promoting yourself. You have a couple years of experience working with other editors. And so those traditional presses and those small presses can then look at you as less of a risk. Because it is a risk. Publishing is an absolute risk, because these publishers are putting their money forth and hoping that you're going to make back on that investment. And so short fiction lives in that sphere as well, where you get to experiment and find out where it goes. So always follow submission guidelines. This is the absolute rule. Always follow submissions guidelines. If you do not know the submissions guidelines for where you are submitting, look them up. If you cannot find them easily, ask. But always follow submissions guidelines. Usually, if you cannot find the submissions guidelines easily, that means that they are closed. So take that where it is. Attempt to keep your word count away from maximums. This is another one that just comes from me having spent 10 years in the slush pile. It's a lot easier to put something under a certain word count in a magazine than it is to put something over a certain word count. So when you are creating stories for a literary journal market, or when you're creating stories that are meant to go on e-zines and magazines, always see what the maximum word count is and make sure yours is well underneath. That's just a little helpful there. Because they can always ask you to add a scene or two. It's a lot harder to kind of snip, and take away. If you're writing short stories for publication, ensure you know the deal involved before posting on your blog /Ko-fi /Patreon Substack or Wattpad. If you are writing a short story for publication and you want this to go into the literary journal market, do not post it online. Don't do it. Don't post it on your blog. Don't make it something, for your Ko-fi members. Don't put it on your Substack as a paid thing. Do not post it online until after it has been published in a literary journal. Because most literary journals want first, not exclusive necessarily, but they want first publication. Daz, me, I don't overflow with words. I actually look at the minimum and stress to make sure I reach over. Dude! Hello, dude! I'm going to take this moment to just have a small little bit of an ad break and drink some water so I don't kill myself. My poor voice. Scared Sapha away. No. It's the Covmonia. It's the Covmonia. All right. Here we go. Welcome, dupe. Welcome to Asset Economy, the workshop. Intro to short fiction. Today's focus is short fiction between 1,500 and 7,500 words. You can go up to 10. That's totally cool. If you are self-publishing this short story, then great. You can do up to 10, and then you know that you can put it in print. But it's up to you. When I worked as an editor, we rarely considered fiction over 5,000 words due to final page count. So try and keep yourself within minimums. Hedge your bets. Avoid max word counts on short stories you ship to journals /magazines. Please never, ever, ever submit a short story that is over the word count maximum. The odds are they'll take one look at the word count that's usually written somewhere on the submission and go, no. And they're not even going to read it because you didn't follow. So keep it underneath max word count, give them room to play. Let's talk historical context. Short stories are thousands of years old. Two veins of storytelling exist, verse and prose. In considering the history of short fiction, a distinction needs to be made between written stories and often oral tales later written down. While we can and often do write down spoken word stories or oral stories, the vast majority of mythological and folk tales were spoken aloud at one point, using fixed rhythm and rhyme, and later recorded for posterity, historical record, or clarity long after the originators ceased to speak. This gives us license to be more poetic and rhythmic with many pieces of shorter fiction, something I love to do with flash fiction or pieces which trend less than 2,000 words. Once you get over that 2K mark, maintaining poetic convention rises exponentially in difficulty, and reader comprehension can suffer depending on the conventions used and the intended readership. Readers will only follow us so far down the road. So short fiction began with an oral tradition. It began before people wrote things down. And so what we find, by and large, in when we look at the historical context of literature, is that usually when something was originally an oral story, when something was originally a spoken story, not written down, but was, spoken over the fire, that is usually in verse. It's usually poetry. It usually has a certain amount of rhythm. It has certain conventions to it. Usually that oral story was verse. It was poetry. What we find about circa 2000 BCE is people started writing stories down, not because it was something that was spoken over the fire, but because they were a scribe creating a story. Those stories are almost entirely prose. And we get to see, the trend of those prose stories beginning in Egyptian stories like the shipmaker and the sailor, circa 2000 BCE. And due to the nature of literacy, early prose was meant for aristocrats because they were the only ones that read, and often included a didactic bent. So they usually included a moral to the story. You can see this for yourself in Aesop's fables, the Panchatantra, biblical texts, and again, those Egyptian stories, things like that. So I find it incredibly interesting, the difference between, thank you, Nix. I appreciate that. It is a fascinating difference when it comes to short fiction. Absolutely fascinating. I love looking at it. And when you look at stories that were originally written down and meant to be read, not written down because they had been spoken and somebody wanted to save it, but specifically written down to be read, it was prose. Sentence structure, syntax, prose. But when it was a story that was told around the campfire, all of a sudden you've got verse. So you want to think of verse, think of things like the Epic of Gilgamesh, think of Beowulf and the King Who Forgot. So those are a couple of examples of that. A distinction can be made between written prose stories and oral tales inscribed later. The vast majority of performative oral tales used fixed rhythms, rhyme, and stock phrases. Think of the skaldic kenning to aid memorization. And so kennings were really important in skaldic literature. If you don't know what a kenning is, a kenning is a repeated phrase that's a little bit sort of metaphorical. So in a lot of Scandinavian skaldic poetry and skaldic works, you get a lot of alliteration and things within the rhyming structure, within the structure of these things. And you also get many kennings, and you can actually look up online, just go skaldic kenning, and there's an entire website available online where it lists every single kenning that they've been able to find. Things like bone cage, like he rattled his bone cage. What is a bone cage? It's your ribs. It's your body. It's your skeleton. And so every single time in Beowulf, you see something like rattled bone cage, because bone cage has a different cadence than something like skeleton, or another word that you could put down for that kind of thing for the human body. It gave this maintained presence to keep that rhythm going, that beat the shield rhythm. And so kennings and various things like that became incredibly popular because the oral storytellers were able to add those in. They knew they would maintain a certain rhythm, but they also knew that these were common enough phrases that would aid in memorization. Because when you're performing, the Kalevala, the thing is huge. How did they remember all of these stories? Well, they remember it through things like this. And so there is an incredibly rich tradition. My flesh person, yeah. Oh, there's an incredibly rich tradition for having that poeticism in shorter fiction. This is something Daz was asking before we got started, especially pieces which trend less than 2,000 words. Now, this is a fairly modern edition when I say less than 2,000 words. It used to be 100 years ago, even 120, 200 years ago, you could have epic poems go for pages and pages and pages and pages, and people were there right along with you the entire time. Not today. Writing and literacy has changed. And so I tend to keep those poetic conventions for fiction less than 2,000 words. Let's see. Okay, so Jute says, as a kid, I loved to read Aesop's Fables. One of my favorite tales was the one with the crow and the pebbles. Aw, that's a good one. Aesop's Fables are wonderful. And Aesop's Fables were originally prose. And now, here's something too with a lot of fiction that we actually have extant. That didactic level of it, that kind of moral of the storytelling, that was where children's literature started. And we see that too with one of the oldest pieces of children's literature we have, the Lamia, which was from the Roman age. And then there are precursors to that, which are in the Hellene period, going quite far back, a few thousand years back. And the tale of the Lamia as a way to get children to listen to their parents and go to bed on time. And of course, that's how children's literature started. If you don't go to bed, the monster underneath your bed will, the monster in the closet, the monster, Lamia, is going to come through the window and eat you. That is one heck of a short story. That was actually the starting of children's lit, because it was specifically voiced for children. And now poetic convention in prose rises exponentially in difficulty with a higher word count and story complexity. So we do need to absolutely remember that, and we need to hold on to that, because especially now with the thousands of manuscripts published every day, readers will only follow us so far down certain roads. And this is where we start getting into tailoring our fiction with an economy of prose, an economy of narrative. And this is why it's called asset economy, because we are being economical with our narratives and with the amount of people, places, and things that we put into our fiction. And when it comes to, what some people will call purple prose, when it comes to a lot of poetic devices, they work fantastically well in fiction under, 2,000 words. But once you start trying to do that for 4,000, people start getting their eyes a little crossed. And again, think of how many people are actually reading poems like the Mahabharata all the way through. That is, 100,000 couplets in that epic poem? Very few people can read that the whole way through nowadays. Very few people can read an Ode to Hyperion by Keats the full way through and understand and have good enough comprehension that they are able to answer questions about it. They know that it's beautiful, but whether or not understanding comes with that is a completely different circumstance. And this is going to go along, see you in a minute, there, dupes. This is going to go along with not only form, but genre, depending on the context of what we're going to do. And so our task as writers is to know our audience, to know what we expect of them and what we want to leave them with at the end of the trail. Whether you pave your narrative road with simplified tarmac for an easier, faster read, or the cobblestones of complexity is up to your research and intention. So here we go. Keep the majority of phrase, repetitions, rhythm, alliteration, rhyme, and other poetic conventions under 2,000 words. It totally can be done. Please do it. I will do more on flash fiction, and we can go over some of those things in a different workshop. And now here we go on to readers and audience. Who are we writing for? Ourselves? Others? Before we can decide on narrative choices and inspirations, we ought to know. You need to know who you're writing for. Our task as writers is to know our audience. What do we expect of them? What do we want to leave them with when we're done? So best-selling thrillers, like a lot of those thrillers that you see in the grocery store, or those thrillers that are like, oh, this is a best-selling thriller, even a lot of Stephen King books trend. I say trend because there's a trend that they do. Sometimes it's a little bit nebulous, but for the most part they trend toward a 4th grade reading level. They are written as if a 9-year-old can understand every single word that's in there. That's what it means by a 4th grade reading level. It means that some 9-year-old kid should be able to pick this book up and read it and understand enough of it to comprehend the story that's being written. That, oddly enough, between a 4th and 5th grade reading level is where the majority of Americans are at. A majority of Americans who read bestsellers and things like that are at a 4th or 5th grade reading level. They are reading at a 9 or 10-year-old's reading level. Now, the sad thing is, in the last 20 years, reading level has actually, has gone down, which sucks, but that's the way it is. And so in other countries, reading level is much higher, but when you're looking at an American specific market, you are looking at people who are reading usually on a 4th or 5th grade reading level. Literary fiction, where short stories and poetry lives, is closer to 9 to 10th grade reading level. It's high school and above when it comes to reading levels. So this is a very, very big difference between a best-selling thriller and something like literary fiction, or the quality of fiction that is expected in magazines and journals. You are expected to have a much higher reading level in something like a short story or in something like poetry. You were expected to be a little bit more cerebral than if you were writing something that is supposed to be in that thriller market, that, best-selling romance kind of market. So that is something to absolutely keep in consideration. The higher the reading level, the longer and more complex the language. Now, this is how reading level works. There are various different algorithms that you can kind of use to approach reading level. There is no one standard. There's a couple of different standards for reading level out there. Reading level is usually dictated by an algorithmic investigation into the amount of words per sentence, the amount of syllables per word, an amount of high frequency or more complex and lesser used words that are in a manuscript. Might explain why RPG fiction doesn't go as big as a bestseller. Well, here's the thing too, when it comes to science fiction and fantasy, it is expected that sci-fi and fantasy has a higher reading level than a best-selling thriller. Especially fantasy. Fantasy has a higher reading level than, your insert best-selling series of, spy versus spy novel here. Pauline Lee, hello! I've noticed that the average reading level of literary magazines is noticeably higher than in book publishing. It is. It absolutely is. And this is... How are you? This is something to consider when you are designing your short fiction, that cerebral creativity, that sort of, punching above your weight, getting in there, writing this intense, heteroglossic, multiple layer upon layer sort of experience now lives in the literary magazine market. A lot of book publishers cannot necessarily find the audience for something which is incredibly well told, but is so complex that it goes over the majority of readers' heads. And when you're dealing with a society currently in the Western world, in the English language world, which has gone down from about a grade 7 reading level to a grade 4 within a period of a couple of decades, then you're having to look at your fiction in a different way. What genre is it? Who are you trying to sell it to? This question of audience becomes so much more important. And it is a consideration whether you are writing to publish or whether you're just writing because you love writing. There's nothing wrong with writing for the sake of writing. It's an amazing experience. And then what I would consider is your audience is you. Your audience is you and a few of your friends. Like, you should know your audience. If your audience is you, you should know thyself. All right. So know thy audience. Know who you are writing for. If you are writing within certain genres, there are certain levels of expectation. If you are writing in the contemporary romance or the thriller market, if you are writing in, just sort of basic, action kind of market, you're writing for a 4th or 5th grade reading level there. If you are writing in science fiction or fantasy, you have a bit more room to play because they are expecting more of you when it comes to the sort of cerebral nature of a lot of prose, but you're still not writing academic levels of vocabulary if you want something to be a high-selling fantasy novel. This is why the young adult novel, the YA novel, has been such a presence in publishing, because they are meant to have language appropriate for 10-year-olds. They're easy reading. That's why they're so popular, because people can consume a novel like that in a day, a few hours, and then they can move along on their way. Know thy audience, step 1. Don't use thy. Yeah, know thy audience, step 1. If you're trying to write for the massive amount of people, don't use thy. Know yourself. If you are a writer, write for yourself, write for your friends. If you are somebody who wants to make a career out of it, then you have to consider the market. Hello, the terrible novelist. Oh, you're welcome. I hope you're enjoying it. And just to remind everybody that the pinned message is about the printable that we have for the workshop part of this. There's a 2-page printable, and there's also the PDF of this presentation available for everybody who is a Twitch subscriber, Ko-fi member, Substack member, and also for who go on saphaburnell.com and grab it. Now, this is why I say we have to, know our market, that we have to know our audience, and we have to know ourselves. And if there's one thing that you get from this is what I want you to concentrate on. It's one thought: to uncloud a short fiction narrative. What do I want my readers to feel or think by the end? What is it? What do I want that reader to go, the end? Huh. What is that? What is that? What is that, the thing, that presence, that idea that you want the reader to keep after they're finished reading that story? It could be something as simple as, well, they smiled. That's great. We all need to smile. We all need entertainment pieces. One person who does stories like that, I'm thinking of the Button Stories by David Payne, aka Talon Artho. When he writes a short story about his dog, it is freaking hilarious. And they are so cute, and they are so wonderful, and I love them. Is it the same as when I'm reading a story like A Very Old Man with Enormous Wings, and you have that moment of this angelic and tired elderly figure flying off and away from people who put him in a cage because they're trying to monetize a blessing? I'm going to read Gabriel Garcia Marquez because I want to feel that kind of philosophical approach to everyday humanity, seeing the divine. But it all depends on where your stories are going to live and who your audience is and what you want them to feel. So when you are sitting there going, okay, I want to write a short story, what do I do? The first thing I want you to think about is, well, what do I want my readers to feel? Do I want them to be entertained? Do I want them to laugh, cry? Do I want them to go, aww? Do I want them to be like, oh, that was the sweetest meet cute ever? Or do I want them to feel like they have to turn the lights on because they just read Fell Plumes by Emily Armstrong? The perfect ending, yeah. Think of what you want them to feel. And if you are your audience, if you're just not writing for publication, but you're just writing for the sake of enjoying yourself, what do you want to feel? What are you working on? What are you working out? So this gives us a little divergence between writers and authors. A writer writes, regardless of the outside world or because of it. But a writer writes narratives full of passion, authenticity, and imagination, full stop. That is the only task of a writer. It is a beautiful place of artistic purity where we get to come in, write our stories, full stop. All of us who create stories are writers. An author is a writer who is expecting to become a professional in the commercial field of putting that fiction out there for strangers to read. Melts into a puddle in his chair. Oh, poor terrible novelist. Hope you're okay. Yeah. An author considers the market in which that writing will wither or thrive, because an author is expecting to get compensated for this work. So all of us are writers. Being a writer is a beautiful thing. The best work I've ever read in my life when it comes to narrative has been by writers who will never, ever, ever, ever publish a single word, because that's not what they're doing it for. They're doing it to have fun. They're doing it to kind of express something and to share a story with their friends. Some of the very best writing I've ever seen in my life comes from that writing sphere, and it is beautiful, and it is wonderful, and it is valid. If you want to publish your work, if you want to make a commercial go of being compensated financially for that work or being compensated in some way for that work, you are getting into the sphere of being an author, and there's a lot more complications that come into it. Great. Yay. Okay, great. To be an author is to profess a desire to become a creator of commercial product. With that comes the business of publishing, taxes, cost-benefit analyses, market trajectory, promotion and marketing, and profit margin. All of that requires consideration, which is unnecessary to the writer who by art lives and breathes. Authors are writers who dive into the business of it with the hope of commercial and financial success. And if the business goals are intimidating or overwhelming, I encourage you to seek a small press or traditional publisher. This is why I said earlier that short fiction is amazing for kind of getting your feet wet, because you get to learn a lot about the business of writing by using short fiction and then getting into as many different literary journals as you can and seeing the different processes and seeing how they do things, so you can learn whether or not that's for you in the first place. It's a fantastic way of doing things. And so short fiction lives in that wonderful space, that nebulous space between writer and authorship. It's this incredibly creative space where we get to be more cerebral, where we get to tell the stories we want to tell, where we get to be more literary in the way we view things than if we were just trying to, throw out novel after novel, 2 a year of something that's going to hit the bestseller market. The thriller or the romance market. So there is that consideration to make. The author always needs to keep this idea of the ideal reader in their minds, in the back of their heads. When I'm writing for Neon Lieben, I'm writing for a different sort of person than when I'm writing the Judge of Mystic saga. Judge of Mystic Saga with Charanash, son of Abel, the future coming book of Revels in Gunungagap, is a work of Mythpunk. It is a work of magic realism. It is contemporary fantasy. My Cyberpunk series is a bit more cerebrally high, kind of hard science fiction with very philosophical and emotionally deep characters that I'm hoping will live for generations to come. That is the purpose of Neon Lieben and the sequel Emptiness at the Center coming later this year. It is that level of I'm going for it. I'm being as cerebral as I can. Whereas with the Judge of Mystic saga, I just want people to have a good time. I want them to have a good time. I want them to be feeling the drama. And then in the end of it, I want them to see that love, compassion, and mercy conquers all. There's two different ways that goes. And so I have that idea of my audience in my head when I'm going to approach a certain story. All right. And now, if, this is another thing too, there's a lot of talk between being an indie or being a traditionally published person. Publishers are there to help take financial costs and some of the business tasks off your shoulders. That's what they're there for. You can also seek mentorship with an indie author who's been through the ringer before and come out on the other side of your genre of choice. And I sincerely say too, when you are looking for a mentor, look for somebody in your genre. I'll say it again. When you're looking for a mentor, find somebody who's in your genre. It does less good to have somebody that's used to writing, say, historical romance novels, trying to teach somebody how to write sci-fi, or trying to be there to talk about the market when it comes to very different forms of fiction. So definitely attempt to find somebody that is on your wavelength. Oh my goodness. It's so essential. It's absolutely essential. So definitely, if you are going to seek mentorship with an indie author, or if you're trying to make the decision of whether to go at indie or whether you're going to try and find a publisher in the traditional market, whether or not, you want somebody to cover the cost is a huge consideration. If you don't have the thousands of dollars it takes to, write certain things and produce them on your own, then indie journals, lit journals, and anthologies, things like that, they're a huge consideration. There we go. Go for it. So let's keep going. Now we're going to get into creating the short stories themselves. So I wanted to talk about the business of it, because knowing your audience and knowing what you're intending to do with this story is so incredibly important to how you write it. So many times throughout my career, especially with the small presses, it was astounding how many times we would be talking to authors, we would be talking to people to see whether or not we were going to publish their work, and be like, okay, who is this for? What is your intended audience? Oh, I don't know. Whoever. Who buys your book? Who buys your magazine? Okay. What was your process? Well, I just sat down and I wrote it. Okay, well, what's it about? Now, if I told you, that'll be spoilers. You get the feeling this person does not necessarily know who they're writing for. And they're just kind of throwing the spaghetti at a wall. And, there is a certain amount of goodness for throwing spaghetti at a wall. There is a tremendous place that we can go when we're learning ourselves and learning our style, and we're just trying things out. But the hope is that by the time you're actually producing something that's meant to be going out there, that you know where you're going to want to put it. So let's start focusing on the economy of our narrative choices. Brevity is the game. We'll see a quote later from Shakespeare's Hamlet. If you can quote it now, the quote about brevity from Shakespeare, I will be very happy. Brevity is the name of the game with short fiction. And especially, like I said earlier, when Daz was asking questions before we started, like, can you have chapters in a short story? No. You can in a novelette or a novella. In something like Whiskey and Sinner's Blood, my novella that is in Macabre and Monstrous, the short story collection that We Aren't Dead Yet produced just recently. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. If you like horror, you'll love it. Whiskey and Sinner's Blood has basically chapters because it is a novella. It is a more expansive story. It's a mini novel. Something that is a short fiction between 1,500 words and 7,500, there's not enough time. There's not enough time. That's where I end up finding, yes, brevity is the soul of wit. There you go. Next, you did it. Yay! Talk to me later. I'll give you something. You'll get a prize. A lot of the time, we've been seeing this with Stories on Fire. Shout out to the Stories on Fire challenge that's currently going on within Exhaustible Media and the Right Team. If you want more information on that, you can talk to the Lady Wrights and other people who are doing Stories on Fire. But a lot of the time when I see writers struggling with a short story, usually it's because of an overcomplication. Usually they're trying to fit too much into one story. And so we are talking about the economy of our narrative assets today. We are talking about condensing things down and getting to one firm kind of position on certain things, because the second you try and have a whole bunch of scene breaks and scene moves and scene this and that, and now we're here and now we're there and now we're introducing another character and now we're trying to do this, well, we have to introduce this character because they're important to that guy because it's the other guy's best friend, and we're trying to get this girl to go on a date with that guy's best friend's brother, but we can't get her to go on the date with the guy's best friend. All of a sudden you're, what is this story about? Well, we're trying to get this girl on a date. Okay, Why do we need 7 different conversations to do that? Where's the one conversation that creates change? That's where we're living with a short story. Short fiction is finite. So we are going to choose a limited color palette of character, setting, plot, and symbol to uncomplicate a tangled narrative and clarify the story for ourselves and our readers. The biggest issue in short fiction over my 15-year career has been a desire to complicate the narrative. And now this usually happens when we have people who are used to longer form media. They are used to being, they're working towards their novels, they're working towards novellas, they are working towards, world built with, tons of material to it. And there's nothing wrong with writing novels. Novels are wonderful. I write them myself. But when we're looking at short fiction, we need to condense down to a single moment. Where I say flash fiction is like a Polaroid picture. Think Carlos Williams, the poem where there's a red wheelbarrow beside some chickens. That poem is literally just about a red wheelbarrow beside some chickens. That's like flash fiction. You've got one Polaroid picture and it comes into focus and you're done. With a short story, we are still taking that concept of being very economical with our narrative, and we are not telling the story of the whole world. We're telling the story of one moment of change. And that's it. That's it. So this idea of telling the story of the whole world, well, I have to give you the context of the whole world. Well, this hits especially in speculative fiction. Speculative fiction, aka science fiction, fantasy, horror, in places where you are creating external locations or you're creating a place that's not the real world. Any place that is speculative, usually that's where I'll see it a lot. People try and overload their fiction, their short stories with all these different things. Well, you have to know how the magic works. Why? Is it important to the main character and what they're going through? Well, it's kind of it's really okay. So in the novel that this is based on, okay, in the novel you can tell me how magic works. I don't need it here. I need the purity of the story. So, I'm looking at my notes. A piece of short fiction is a 2-page editorial spread in a magazine. If any of us have seen various magazines and things like that where they have that giant 2-page spread, usually that huge picture, that, really nicely well done, well laid out 2-page, bam, this editorial kind of thing. You get that especially in fashion magazines and architectural digests and different things like that. That 2-page spread. That's kind of the feel that I'm looking for with a short fiction piece. Not that it's only 2 pages long, but that it has that same feeling of turning the page of a magazine and going, whoa. And then having the majority of that image contain all of the different symbols and everything that we're working with. So a single conglomerate image which tells a story reader that this is what they're engaging with in one single sitting. I'm going to repeat that. This short story is one single conglomerate image, in prose, readers can engage with in one sitting. The vast majority of people who read short fiction want to read a short story in one sitting. They don't want to read it in 7 sittings. They don't want to take a break and come back to it later and take a break and come back and take a break and come back. A good piece of short fiction is going to live in that single session read. And people are smart-ish sometimes. People, they can, especially if they're doing this digitally and they can see it on their phone or their app or their Kindle or wherever they're looking at it, it'll tell them how long they think it's going to take them to read this on the bottom of the page. So if they've only got 20 minutes and this thing's going to take them 40 minutes to read, they might save it for later. Or maybe they'll read half of it and then go from there. But for the most part with short fiction, it's a 30-minute read. I've only got about 20 minutes in the car. You know what? I'm going to read that later. It becomes incredibly important because Well, I'll tell you why. So we've got a question here. What is a single session length? Is there different lengths for different audiences? Yes, there is different lengths for different audiences. It depends on your genre. It depends on how old the person is that's reading it, and it depends on their daily life. A lot of people who commute will read something either in the car / I mean, not if they're driving. If you're driving, please, audiobooks only, please. Oh, for the love of everything holy, just audiobooks are wonderful. Whew. But if they are, say, a passenger on a SkyTrain, or if they are taking the bus or something like that, and they know they've got, a 20-minute commute, a 40-minute commute on the train going into the city, then they know they can read a certain amount of thing in that time. Or somebody who's sitting down with a cup of tea later on at night, and they've picked up their copy of insert literary journal here, and they're going to read something. They want to read that story in a single go. They want to keep that experience. They don't want to have to sit it down after 5 minutes and come back. Now, there was some research a few years ago that the majority of readers were reading in 10-minute spurts. That research came out of people reading a lot of blog posts, not necessarily people writing fiction. So it again, know thy audience. Also know thy coffee. Coffee. Now, this idea that a short story can be read in a single sitting, I mean, again, it's not always going to happen, but for the majority, it should. It's to our advantage. As short fiction writers, it is much more to our advantage that we don't have to keep doing what the novelists do, of reminding everybody a chapter and a half later of something that happened a chapter and a half ago. In a novel, most people are reading novels, depending on the novel, within a period of days or weeks. A few people will read novels in a few hours, depending on the kind of novel it is, especially with things like YA fiction, things that can be, pulled in really quickly. But for the most part, novelists are aware people will be reading this thing over a period of days or weeks. So having something happen in chapter 1 and then in chapter 7 needing to remind somebody else that it happened, that becomes part of the way that you tell your stories. There are certain things that need to recur, certain symbols and images and conversations that need to happen, potentially multiple times in the course of a novel, depending on reader experience and how quickly they are reading this thing. There are certain things that need to be reminded of. Like when I was writing Neon Lieben, I needed to remind people that Max was this young guy newly put into a lieutenant position who had no idea what was going on. And so multiple times within that narrative of Neon Lieben, I was reminding people, usually through Ramage, the main villain of the book, that Max was press ganged as a kid. He didn't join the military believing in the goals of the Navy. He was sold by his mom to cover her debt. So all of a sudden you're looking at all this behavior, which is very, very, very much not something that you would see in a military. Max does not act like he's in a military at all. He's scatterbrained out of his mind. But you kept being brought back once in a while, being like, once it gets ridiculous enough, it's like, oh, wait, this kid was press ganged. He never went to officer school. He never went to these things. He never did any of these things. He's just clinging to whatever makes sense. Oh, you have to remind them of that in, something like Neon Lieben, which was 145,000 words. With a short story, on the other hand, we're one and done. We only have to, approach something once. There is something to say for recurring motifs. Think of The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe, which can change over time as the narrative progresses. And that is a rather poetic technique that we can use in short story. But outside of that sort of poetic technique of using certain phrases and motifs as, this moment is changing over time, the Telltale Heart, that kind of thing, or the Cask of Amontillado. But the Amontillado, where's the Amontillado? Outside of that kind of flow, with a short story, we only need to say something once. One and done. I want a sticker. And so that's one way that we can very much condense prose. We don't need to remind somebody every 15 paragraphs that this person is somebody's sister. You just need to say it once, because the person reading it is literally reading it right then and there. They don't need the reminder. So that's something to keep in our minds. And as an editor, I can't tell you how many times I've removed repetitions from a story, and the author go, no, what if the person forgot? They read it 10 minutes ago. You might have written it 5 months ago, but they read it 10 minutes ago. They don't, this person is not a goldfish. They remember. It was 5 minutes ago in their head. They are still sipping the same cup of coffee they were when they started the thing. It's okay. You can remove that. Oh, okay. Yeah, there we go. And so the first thing that we are going to look for, and the first thing that we are going to do, if you have the printable, it's right at the top of the first page, and it says plot vector. We are going to pick a single vector per story. I use the word vector specifically because a vector has both direction and magnitude. It has both direction and momentum. And it is one moment of motion or change. That is what our vector is going to be. That is our pinnacle of our short story. That is what we are forming everything around. So grab your pen and paper, grab your... My recent peer review in college says otherwise. Well, this is one way of looking at a short story. As I said, were you here in the beginning where I showed the disclaimer? The disclaimer of this is not the only way to create short fiction, but it is definitely one way that we're trying today. This motion can be internal, a character realization, an emotional conclusion. It can be something that happens inside a character. No, the goldfish memory. Oh, uh-oh. Well, I hope everybody reading is not a goldfish. Coffee is delicious. All right. So this motion can be internal. It can be the realization of something, or it can be external. It can be something that happens to the person, a plot event. And so we're going to keep that finite goal for each work of short fiction. And this doesn't mean that when you think up 4 different goals for the same character, you have to, I have to get rid of all 4 of them and only use one. It means that each one of those goals, each one of those vectors is its own short story. And if that means you have a cycle of short stories, that's great. But we're only dealing with one vector at a time for a piece of short fiction. All right. So we're going to take a 5-minute go at it. And we are going to write down as many story vectors as you can think of in the next 5 minutes. I will keep the timer on and see what's going on with that. Any plot point, character arc, or happenstance that lends direction, aka a place / a progression to move towards, and magnitude, the energy / ability to get there. Now, classic vectors, things like man versus God, man versus nature, woman escaping jungle, starship attempting escape velocity from a singularity, even things like a father picking up his kid after a hard day. There is a direction. Father's got to go to the school, but there's also a momentum. They've actually got to turn the truck on and get going. There's actually momentum to carry him there. Now, this is a very Western way of looking at storytelling, where you do that kind of that classic, instigating incident going towards, a main point and then kind of trailing off to the end. There is a more kind of Buddhist and Eastern philosophy of things where your vector is either going from order to chaos or from chaos to order. So say a psychological vector for somebody is, their life is a mess and they're attempting to find one way to make it better. Well, then that is them going from a period of chaos to a period of order. So that can be a vector too, that experience of, are you going for or against entropy? What is it? What are we doing? It is the moment then something happens. Now, this is very important because I know that there's a lot of push in the literary community for various kinds of character or setting sketches where nothing the fuck happens. You can only do that so far before readers start just kind of going... Again, we have to take it back to what do we want our readers to feel and think by the end. And usually people want something to have actually happened in a story that they're reading, because otherwise, why are they reading it? And so we are either breaking stillness, or we are reinstalling it, or we are finding stillness in chaos, but we are doing something. We are pushing towards a goal. We are finding our vector. So we are going to take the next 5 minutes, and I'm actually going to put a timer on. Take 5 minutes, grab your pen, paper, your printable, grab a Word document, whatever you want to grab, and start writing down as many story vector ideas as you can, just in the next few minutes. And remember, it can be in the person's head, it can be outside a person's head. You don't necessarily have to have a character in mind yet, but you just have to have that idea of what is it you want readers to feel or think? What are you going for? What is your direction and your momentum? All right. And we're going to start doing that. Are we ready? Are we ready? Are we ready for our vectors? Okay, let's go. Excellent. We are on vectors. We're writing down as many plot vectors as we can in the next few minutes. We've got 4 minutes left. Remember, short fiction is finite. One minute. Final minute. We're going to go until the end of the ad break, so no worries. I will not stop until the ad break is over. stand up because nobody else can see me. Stand it up. Ooh. And we are back from that ad break. And we are back from that sprint. All right, everybody. That is the end of that 5-minute sprint. It ended up being a little bit more than 5 minutes, but that's okay. And thank you to Norse Foundry for the music. Norse Foundry is a fantastic resource if you are a streamer, a TTRPG gamer, if you do anything with videos and different things online. Norse Foundry has access to free, royalty-free music. You just have to tell people where you got it. And I love it. That is the Cyber... Oh, good grief. That is the Cyber Resistance album, which I quite like because it reminds me of my Cyberpunk love. So here we go. What kind of vectors do we have? Let's see them. Who wants to share what they figured out? Who has vectors that they wrote down? Plot vectors. Plot vectors. You got 9 so far. All right, let's hear them. Let's see them, Daz. What are those vectors? Let's see, what are we getting? What are we working with when it comes to plot vectors? All right. I assume Daz is writing some down. But take a look at your vectors. My big bad defeats the Lady Lich, the confrontation. Okay, so we have a confrontation between a Lady Lich and a big bad guy. All right, so that confrontation is that period of motion, that initial battle. That is the motion that we are looking at. All right, that's good. That's good. Ha 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 ha. Let's see, what else have we got? Someone needs to find their missing dog / child / friend. That is an excellent short story vector. That's a fantastic one. It is an initial need that can be resolved by the end. And that is what I want to work with today as well. Although I am familiar with quite a bit of literary fiction and short stories that like to leave things open-ended, and I do believe that there is a way that that can be done, which is effective and powerful, you also do need to congratulate the reader for getting through your story by giving them something in the end. And so having a story where that problem is solved, that person finds their missing dog. They find their missing kid. They find their friend sitting at the coffee shop. And they're like, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't see you. You know, because maybe it's back in 1997 before very many people had cell phones. And if you said you were going to meet somebody at 10 o'clock in the morning at a coffee shop and your day went to heck and you're late and you're running and you're trying to get there on time and you're not going to make it on time, well, you're just hoping that that person sits there and waits for you because they have no idea what's going on and they have no way to contact you. And all of a sudden, that's a huge story. That's thousands of words of like traveling around. Do I get my coffee now? Do I sit down? Do I wait? Maybe I should walk around the mall a little. Maybe I should try and look for them. Oh my goodness, what if they don't come? What if they're not here? All of a sudden, you've got a 4,000 word story there, and all you're doing is having somebody wait for a friend. Or maybe they are going to find their friend. Something which a lot of people who have lived in the cell phone text message, period of time, they might not have ever experienced. Try leaving your phone at home for a few days and having no computer to access. Yeah, I know. It's my Alexa. All right. So when we're looking at our vectors, we are looking at finding one of those vectors. One main character, one plot point, one vector, one moment of change or equilibrium. That's what we're looking at for a short story. Yes, short fiction is an excellent way to pitch your writing style and narrative structure, introduce a character who appears in a larger project, or display a world build. I did this with Cagewire, with the introduction of Demian Anastas in a prequel to Neon Lieben that was published in Futures Lenses and then the Lenses Anthology with Inexhaustible Media. Shout out to Stories on Fire. I also did this with the novella Whiskey and Sinner's Blood, which appeared in Macabre and Monstrous. Whiskey and Sinner's Blood introduced Carolee, an important side character in my Judge of Mystic saga, while remaining itself a contained narrative. This idea of creating a series of short stories to publish for a low price tag, if not free, to promote a larger project is something a lot of independent authors are being told to do. It can work. It can be a solid path, especially if you, like many of us, have a Substack, Patreon, Ko-fi, and need to get on the content creation train. As long as you have finite goals for your fiction, it's a bring it on scenario, specific moments in time, which swoop in, a light on the page or the screen, and then drift off for the next piece of prose. It can be an effective tool and a way to build your writing skills by releasing the need for a complexity of plot and engaging with one idea or thought process at a time. Streamlined as the albatross on an oceanic air current. And just like that usually solitary albatross, a good piece of short fiction stands alone. This is why we're going with one vector. We're going to take that list of vectors. Each one of those, congratulations, each one of those is either one or multiple short stories. Bam. You've got the idea for multiple short stories right there on your worksheet. But like that albatross, a good piece of short fiction stands alone. It exists as a cliff face exists, perilous against the battering winds, while the microcosm around it flourishes or clings for dear life. While we can ensure there is a rich and emotive world built around it, we should not fall prey to a classic short form blunder. Oh, poor M's like, I need an idea. Beware the centipede-like contextipede. A creature of interconnected story fragments where one must read more and more and more of other stories and content before the real context or meaning of a piece can be found. It becomes an impossible conundrum I often see when asking a writer of short stories, awesome, where do I start? Okay, so you can start here and then that'll interest this guy, but you won't exactly understand this guy until you read this one with this person. Oh, but you know what? This is what I do to introduce the world, but you could go back and you know what? You should read this. You should read this. Actually, you know what? You're not going to get that because you didn't get this other thing. Whoa. Every single one of our plot vectors, they should be able to stand on their own 2 feet. And now, I say this knowing that the majority of people who are writing short fiction are writing it while writing multiple pieces of short fiction within the same world. And one thing that tends to happen, especially with people that are getting going, they're churning their wheels, they're getting going there. That kind of hinders them when writing short fiction is they try and put in too much. And this is why I'm drilling home. Use one story idea. That's it. No subplots. One progression. Just one. Because a lot of the time when you're coming to it either from a TTRPG standpoint or you're coming at it from the terms of a novelist, you're going to want to connect 17 dots in one story. And then that story suddenly can't breathe on its own. It requires oxygen from an external source in order for it to be something that people can connect to and just happen upon and exist in. And odds are, when that happens, what you're actually doing is writing chapters in a novella or a novelette. And so if you find that your short stories are becoming too complicated and that you need to kind of connect the dots on multiple short stories in order for that narrative to make sense, then congratulations, you're writing a novella. You're writing a novelette. Every single one of those stories is becoming a chapter in a different, larger work. But what we're doing today is we're looking at a short piece of fiction. A short piece of fiction shouldn't necessarily matter if you write 10 of them and one person starts on story 4, another person starts on story 7, another person starts on story 9, and somebody else goes back to story 1. That should not matter, because every single short story is one vector. It is one direction, one moment in time. We are focusing in on one piece of motion or change, either a breaking of the stillness or a reinstallation of it. It belongs to that character. It belongs to that piece. Each story should have the capacity to stand alone, but when viewed in a larger context, add complexity to the creative universe. Oh, beautiful. Uh-oh. Hope your kid's okay. Jute says, a man falls over the side of an Alaskan fishing boat was one of mine, so that oceanic reference is totes vibe. Oh my goodness, Jeff. Yes. Okay. Yeah. A man falls over the side of an Alaskan fishing boat. And so with that story, I'm expecting that the man falls over the side of an Alaskan fishing boat, and that story ends either when he gets back into that boat, or I mean, if you're in Alaska and it's wintertime and you fall into the water, you've got 90 seconds. Sorry. Or something will happen to it that concludes that. Something will happen that concludes that. I don't foresee a story like that when a man falls out of boat. Unless you were a mermaid. Hey, there's the switch. Maybe they find out that they're a merman. Maybe they fall into the water and all of a sudden they grow a fishtail and they're like, whoa, I'm saved. Oh, look, I'm a sturgeon, and they have the best life ever. That would be an awesome twist to that plot point of man falls out of boat. But I'm expecting that by the time I'm finished that short story, I'm not left to wonder whether or not that guy made it. I want to know. Mer people might still freeze in Alaska, Ooh. I don't know how much belly fat do they have. Oh, ice fishing, yay! Oh, my spouse and my in-laws, my father-in-law is threatening to take me ice fishing, and I'm going. The orcas, yes. So let's take a look at a short story, and I'll get to you, Daz, in a minute. Demian's introduction in Cagewire is an in medias res moment, his first glimpse of the glitz and holographic glamour of a future London, which bears the distinction of one rare metropolis untampered by years of war. He is a wide-eyed ingenue in a military veteran's haircut, diving through the tumult of bodies for a contact which never comes until he can reach a place of relative safety. Once he succeeds, the story stops. Yes, there is a larger story to Demian's first night in London. Yes, the stakes are vast, and we see more of that in Neon Lieben. We see it in the upcoming Cagewire series. We see it in other places, but Cagewire specifically itself, the short story, is about Demian arriving in London, trying to find his contact. When he can't, he finds a place to go. We're done. That's it. We have solved that initial problem, and then we got the fuck out of the story. Now let's see here. Can you make a short story that later gets expanded into a chapter? Can you take a concept of a moment in time and tell more of the things around it? Absolutely, yes, but that is not what we're looking at today. So is there a larger story there with Demian trying to find a place to go in London in 2079? Absolutely, there's a larger story there. But In order to tell this one story, we are telling the story of Demian finding a relatively safe place. That's it. And we're getting out. In Fell Plumes by Emily Armstrong, we see Mech and Lark on the space lanes taking a courier job in the Outer Fringe. The promise of the story is by the end of it, Mech and Lark will have made a delivery. Armstrong does not disappoint. And by the end of it, we see that there is a delivery that is made. And while we know there is a rich amount of context to the Elder Space universe, we see only what is relevant to the delivery. We, as readers, know there is more to the life stories of Mech and Lark. We know that there is more to the story of Demian and Cagewire. But this specific story is about them making a delivery. That's it. Don't overcomplicate it. Leave the allusions to other things to the people who read your work and go, wow, I want to read other things. And then provide them with other things. That is the good thing. Like what I was saying at the very beginning of this workshop, when it comes down to short fiction is an excellent way to teach people what your style is. You know, to teach people what to expect when they read your books and what to read, when to read your fiction. And so if they read your short story, just by the quality of writing alone and the way the characters live and breathe on the page, that is what is going to make people want to read more. You don't have to dangle 17 carrots over somebody's head to make them read more of a writer they enjoy. Readers are voracious. Readers are wonderful, incredible people who go, wow, I liked that. Give me more. If you have to try and convince somebody that they need to read more of your work in order to understand something else, it's a little bit, now if I may be a little bold, it's a little bit like what Marvel did between Endgame movies, where they said you have to go see the Captain Marvel movie in order to understand Endgame. Well, they basically conned people into seeing a movie that half of them did not like. I don't care what you thought about the Marvel Captain Marvel. I'm not going to get into that. But they basically told people, well, you have to see this movie in order to understand this other thing. But that wasn't true. You could see Endgame. You can see both. You can see those movies. You didn't have to see Captain Marvel to understand them at all. And so what happens is, if you look at the state of Marvel Comics and you look at the state of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, there's a lot of people who are giving it a lot of guff. There's a lot of people who are angry at it because they're like, stop telling us we need to see 17 series in order to understand what one character is doing in a film. And yet, if you write a compelling short story, a compelling moment in time, like we see in Fell Plumes by Emily Armstrong, when you see what happens to Mech and Lark, anybody who is interested in Emily's writing style, who is interested in the incredible power of the images and narration that are available in that story, they are naturally going to want to read more of Emily's work. They're going to ask for it. And you don't have to try and pull somebody into it. You don't have to try and coerce somebody into reading more. They're going to want to do it because they're falling in love with your work. And so all you have to consider when you're writing a piece of short fiction is, yes, this thing exists within an entire landscape, an entire world build. But if I tell this one moment convincingly, readers will want to read more. They will be asking, where's the next one? What happens? Where's the next one? What about this person? What about that? What about the other thing? We saw this with the Judge of Mystics saga when it came to Finnegan. The character of Finnegan that I added as a throwaway in one scene, and then all of a sudden people were like, no, dude, where's Finnegan? I want more of Finnegan. And now Finnegan is one of the key characters in the entire novel series because in a short story I wrote a tiny little throwaway leprechaun character named Finnegan. And people who adore your work, people who love your work, and they will love your work if you love it, and if you are passionate about crafting a narrative that is clear, that is concise, and that feels alive, then they will naturally be drawn to more of your work. So I hope that alleviates some of the pressure that's on a lot of us when we're trying to be like, okay, well, I've got to introduce this character, and then I've got to introduce the world, and then I've got to explain all these things, and I've got to make sure that people understand what this is about. Hold on. Write the microcosm. Write the moment. Full stop. Let yourself live and breathe in that moment. Let yourself live and breathe in that emotion. Let yourself live and breathe with that character coming to the conclusion, like Damien did in Cagewire, that he's sitting at a table in a bar. He has no money to his name. He's scared, and there's people after him who want to end his life. And he's looking across the table and realizes that this guy dressed like a Ferrari man is willing to buy him a drink. And maybe if he plays his cards right, he can figure out a way to sleep on the guy's couch. Or maybe if he just sort of flirts a little, if he does something, he can come to be in a safe place and figure things out in the morning. Live in that. Live in that moment. Experience that moment. And then let the rest go. So that the readers can go, wow, okay, what else happens? Okay, no, seriously, what else happens? And I gotta hydrate. It's time to hydrate. Thanks, dupe. Also, haha, sticker still on there. Oh, also, I don't know if you can. Oh no, you can't see because of the camera angle, but. And my squishmallows are right there. Dupe sent me a care package. All right. No, there we go. Okay. Any questions about vectors? Also, I like that one, M. The forgotten automaton reawakens in the wilds with only the memory of the path home. And so then the journey home will be that short stories vector. All right. Anybody have any questions so far? Nah, okay. Yeah, could be a little neat story. All right. So it's fine to leave the life stories of these characters to another time. Yes, in Cagewire. And of course, I'm using my work and Emily's as well, mostly because, you know, I was the editor on Emily's story and on my work. It's freaking mine, so I don't have to worry about, you know, offending anybody with my interpretations of their copyright. With Damien, we know that he was a military veteran. We know that he just survived 7 years of war. We also know that he's a young man who's never experienced life outside of either childhood or warfare. And this is his first night in London. And so we know that there's more to that story, but we're not talking about that part of the story. We're just talking about him trying to find a safe place. And so, yes, it means that later on we can write more stories about that moment. But we are in a moment. And that's where we need to live with short fiction. World building. World build in miniature. Not talking about the little tiny, like, it's a little miniature thing you have. Focus on the setting, interactions, and characters which tie directly into the one simplified plot such character point. Keep your inciting incident, plot, and character count brief, simple, and fluid. We are dealing with one plot with no complication of a subplot. A novella, subplots are great. Novelettes, yes, you can have a subplot. Not here. And like as Daz was saying, but what if my short story is just it's a small part of an interconnected story and I need to have multiple chapters? That's a novelette. That's not a short story. One main impetus at a time with a piece of short fiction. It is a single moment. So only keep in what you need in order to explain that direct moment. Let the readers fill in the rest unless it's absolutely integrally important. We have enough to go on to get through, like let's just take a look. We'll break it down a little bit, and we're on an ad break right now. What if my world is miniature? Meta. Let's break down a little bit with Fell Plumes. Emily's story, Fell Plumes. And we understand that they are in space. Thus, there are spaceships, there are space lanes. We understand that there is a sort of core area and there is a sort of fringe area because they are on the outer limit. They are on the fringe of wherever they are. So we know certain things from that, just from a very short amount of words, that the fact that they are on a spaceship and they're doing a delivery in the fringes means that there is a core, means that there are societies, means that this is the outside of society. And hello, the flock approaches. Hello, Sunshine Raven. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Woo! Welcome. All right, the ad break is breaking in 0. Okay, here we go. Welcome. Hey, Raven, how's it going? We are talking about asset economy, a short fiction workshop right now. So pull up a chair. If you have the printable, it is available. If you are a subscriber to this channel, if you are a Ko-fi member or a Substack paid subscriber, then the printable is available for download and printing right now, or you can purchase it at sapharburnell.com. And welcome. I hope you're having a good day. I hope you got some good writing done. And so this economy of idea really does make economical the world building that you're putting. Not that you don't have an entire world. Like I know for somebody like Daz has Pangorio, Daz has Hypnosium, Daz has multiple worlds in which to ground a narrative. But within this short story, you were drawing today. Oh, nice. Sweet. That is epic. I've been drawing more lately too. It's been fun. I finally downloaded Procreate. It was insane. It took way too long for me to download Procreate. And so although there is a rich world out there, if you do your job well enough with that short story where you just write a compelling piece of a moment, people will naturally want to discover the rest of the world. So they will gravitate towards more of your stuff. You don't have to try and again, put in those 17 carats, only put 1 or 2. Just do your job with that one plot point really, substantially well. Pulls up a chair, ready to learn. Oh, good. And there's plenty of this, so good. I'm glad I hope everyone's ready to learn. Basically what we've done workshop wise, so far, if you look at the asset economy, if you look at the printable, we've just done the plot vector. So basically a vector, if you know any physics, a vector is something with direction and momentum, like direction and kind of like the power to get there. And so that's what we're looking at when it comes to plot points. We were looking at something with direction and momentum. So a couple of examples have been a big bad fighting a lady lich. There's also been the plot vector of a man falling off of a Alaskan fishing boat. And then there is also the plot vector of a forgotten automaton who wakes with no memories but the way home. And so we're thinking of one specific plot point. We are condensing things down. We're talking specifically about stories that are between 1,000 and 8,000 words. We're not talking about novellas or novelettes. We're not talking about novels. We're talking about standalone stories that fit within a short story template. And usually these short stories, if you are a writer, then you're just writing them for yourself. That's great. You're writing them for your friends. That's fantastic. But if you are interested in publishing at all, usually these short stories would be going into literary journals, or you would be looking and approaching publishing, indie publishing. So publishing your own, self-publishing fiction. So more about that earlier. The VOD is there. La 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 la. All right. Choose your crux point. It will be an event, an emotional or mental realization, chaos to order or order to chaos, just like we were talking about. A conversation, maybe a single lengthened time. But your crux point for this story is going to be something with motion. It is pardon me, I'm still recovering. I'm 3 down on my Fisherman's Friends already. It is going to be something with motion. Something's got to give. It's not going to be just flat stillness. There needs to be some form of frequency in the water. And that is important in order to, yes, you can do mood sketches, you can do character sketches and things like that, and those are excellent exercises. But we were talking about a short story that is going to live in somebody's mind. They need a little bit more than just a mood. They need to see that something has happened. Even if, plot-wise, like say you have a character that, let's do... Character gets up in the morning, they make coffee, they give coffee to their spouse, they clean up, they do everything they need to do in a day, and then the spouse goes to work, comes back, they make dinner, everyday life. Well, that plot point of, I start every morning by making coffee and cleaning up and getting everything ready for my spouse, that can be consistent. But somewhere in that story, maybe the crux point is an emotional or mental realization. Maybe that emotional or mental realization is, I find value in doing these simple daily tasks. Or maybe it's like, fuck it, where's my suitcase? Whatever it is, there's still motion. And so we need to find that crux point of motion. And that's where our story is going to live. This can be internal or external motion. The crux of your story, it can be internal, it can be emotional, it can just affect the main character and their attitude, or it can be something that affects a larger landscape. Something like a battle between a big bad and a lich queen, that's an external that's an external landscape. That there's going to be some battle scars around the area because that's a fight that people can see. That's very different from a short story like one I wrote many moons ago, where there was somebody overlooking the devastation of an area, and the entire thing takes place in this one moment where this person is looking at the devastation left behind by a battle in which they lost their father. And the whole thing is just this coming to the emotional realization that they can actually turn around and leave that place behind. All of that was an internal struggle. So you can play with both, but you don't want to overcomplicate things with a short story, so keep it simple. Let's talk characters. Just before we start talking about characters, does anybody have any questions about plot when it comes to short stories? Especially when I was talking about, having multiple short stories in the same world, but they should still stand alone. And again, this is really important for people who are going to be putting forth this fiction into, say, a literary journal market, where the editors who are approaching your fiction are not going to read your entire catalog and body of works in order to decide whether or not they're going to publish this story. And that's another reason why I continue to say that a short story needs to stand alone, because you don't know where it's going. This is not a serialized piece of fiction that you're putting on your Ko-fi every week for, $5 a member. These are pieces of work that you don't know how people are going to engage with them. You don't know where someone's going to start. So you better make sure that they can start basically anywhere. And then if they're interested in your writing style and they're interested in the kinds of narratives that you lay down, they are naturally going to want to read more of them. And then they're going to search you out and they're going to find, oh, whoa, you wrote 7 of these? Great. Where's number 1? And they're going to read them all and they're going to go through all of that. So standalone is actually incredibly important when it comes to that kind of thing, because it alleviates confusion in the reader. And if you find that your short fiction is just constantly and consistently incapable of standing alone, then you're writing chapters in a longer work. And that's okay, but that's not a short story. That's a novelette. It's a novella. It's something like that. So anybody, any questions before I move on to character? Get your pen and paper ready. All right. Doop, 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 doop. Who is this story about? Just like we picked one vector, we are going to pick one main character. There's no multiple main characters in a short story. We are going with one. There's one protagonist. In essence, so the very kind of condensed version of storytelling that we're looking at here, in essence, to tell a story, we require a protagonist, an antagonist, which can be a character, it can be a setting or an event, it can even be the protagonist's own mental monologuing. An antagonist does not necessarily need to be a character, it just needs to be something that antagonizes the protagonist, something that acts as a foil for the protagonist. So maybe it is the protagonist who is attempting to go to school for the first time on their own, and they're standing at the front door, and their mother is in the kitchen, and their mother is like, you said you wanted to walk to school on your own, so get to it, you're going to be late. And, you know, this kid is an 8-year-old, and they have to walk across a busy intersection by themselves. Well, all of a sudden, yes, you can say that the journey itself was the antagonist, but you could also say that the antagonist is actually the fact that the 8-year-old is struggling to not back off and go, mommy, please, take me. And is attempting to just take those 2 first steps out of the door. So when I talk about an antagonist, and when I talk about condensing characters and an economy of cast, these are the sorts of things I'm talking about. You can tell a story with one character and that's it. A complete short story. You don't need 17. I don't know why 17 is the number today, but it is. So in essence, we require a protagonist, an antagonist, which can be a character, a setting, or an event, and maybe a person or two for dialogue or banter. That's it. That's all we need. We don't need anything more than that. Anything more than that can overcomplicate a lot of good stuff. It is a good number. 17 is a good number. It can overcomplicate a lot of stuff. So relieve yourself of the pressure of introducing anyone else, unless they are part of the setting, as the sheer amount of clubgoers in Cagewire were, a piece of background noise, or symbolic tumble through the mire. So, you know, again, going back to Cagewire, we have the story of Damien Anastas, who meets Kaoru. He meets a man named Kaoru in Cagewire, which is a club. Yes, there are thousands of people around them, both just in the city of London. You know, Damien starts off in Piccadilly Circus, and if you've ever been to London and you've been to Piccadilly Circus, you know it's bright, shiny, whoa. You know, if you get overwhelmed by being around people, don't go to Piccadilly Circus. So here's Damien in Piccadilly Circus going, whoa. There's hundreds of people milling around him at all times. But those people become part of the setting. They become part of the background noise. Because the only people we actually have names for are Damien, Kaoru, and then 2 minor people who are really just foils for Kaoru. There's Thomas, Kaoru's initial dancer that tries to get Damien onto the dance floor, and then there's Ferdinanda, the bartender that serves drinks. And Ferdinanda is hired by Kaoru. Kaoru owns the club. So Ferdinanda is basically another part of Kaoru, and Thomas is also another part of Kaoru because he's kind of searching out on the dance floor. So we've got Damien and we've got Kaoru, and that's it. We don't need more than that. Yes, there are more people around, but there's a difference between having a crowd and having a character. Right now, we are going to write down all of the attributes of a character you're interested in. Physical, mental, occupational, even life or momentary purpose. You know, so we're going to do a little sprint. We're going to do 5 minutes. Again, nice and short. Write down anything which comes to mind that you are interested in with a character. Favorite dishes, music, shoes, the way they taste coffee, what species are they, what type or appearance, what do they sound like, how do they eat or consume sustenance. No holds barred. Just, oh no, my ultimate weakness, character stuff. Yeah, you're just going to write down. Now, you don't have to have a specific character in mind here. This is a system of how to build a character when you have no idea what character you're going to put on the page. You're just going to write down attributes of a person or a character that you're interested in. Something that you would want to read or write. That's it. If it's muffins, they like muffins. Great! We have a character who likes muffins. What else about them? Well, what kind of muffin? Oh, savory muffins. Oh, like cheese and chives? Yes! So more like a scone? No, they're American. It's a muffin. Okay, so we've got an American who likes muffins, savory muffins. Okay, what else do we know about this person? And you can kind of build from there. So we're just going to write down attributes of characters that you like, that you're interested in, that make you excited to either read or be part of a story. That's it. And then after that, we're going to kind of build a character from those attributes. So the important thing right now is for the next 5 minutes, all you're going to do is write down as much about character attributes you enjoy as possible. Physical, mental, occupational, the whole thing. All right, I'm going to start the timer and restart the music. We're going to have 5 minutes. And just enjoy it. Bam. Music. Music is on. See you guys in 5 minutes. Woo. Just for people coming in. You're welcome, Jude. I hope to see you again, and the VOD will be available. You can head to the Discord server and get more information on it. Thank you so much for being here. 1 minute. One more minute. I'm out of coffee. And there we go. That is the end of that sprint. All right, everyone. Let's take a look at what we writ. Let's take a look at what we wrote down. What do we have for character attributes? All right. What have we got for character attributes? And again, if you were on the printable, then there is actually a character part of the printable right in the middle. So, afraid of rabbits. That is a good person. Sorry, I hate rabbits. I was bitten by the class bunny when I was in elementary school. Rabbits taste good. I don't care how fuzzy wuzzy they are. I would rather pet a dog. Yeah, I'm with you there, Nix. You were... Is this a Canadian experience? Just like killer bunnies in Canada, you know? Yeah, no, I was bitten by the class bunny when I was in grade 4. Yeah, I was 9. The bunny was out of its hutch, and it hippity-hoppitied through the entire class because we were all sitting on the floor and our teacher was reading us a book. It hippity-hoppitied over other students, clung onto my leg, and chomped down really hard. And I had to swing my leg back and forth, and the bunny was like, whoop, 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 whoop. And then one of the boys kicked it off, and it scampered away. And just pandemonium in the classroom. Like, absolutely, the classroom went nuts. And that class bunny did not leave its hutch the rest of the year. Yeah. Jackrabbits in Alberta are bigger than a small dog, to be fair. They're pretty big. Emily's like, they're cute until they're ripping up the carpeting of your guest room and thumping at 3 a.m. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I hear you there, Nix. Anyway, also one of my cousins was bit in the face by a bunny and continues to have a scar to this day. Canadian bunnies, they're it's like the rabbit from Monty Python. Yeah. Okay, so we got psych nerds, we got afraid of rabbits. We've got so Daz has Big Bad, a wizard consumed to regain his stature. He is bold as brass. His life is at stake. Treachery is his life skill. So, it's okay. We all can word there, Nix. Okay, so Daz has a specific person in their mind. That's okay. That's okay. This also works well, Daz, if you're not specifically thinking of one character that you've already created, but you are attempting to create a brand new character. And so writing down a whole bunch of attributes that you can lash together is a really good skill to be able to have, especially in short fiction. Now, what you're going to do is take a look at the list and then take a look at the plot vectors that you created earlier. And we're going to start to think how we can combine some of those attributes into a person with the life goals, dreams, tasks, and desires in the plot vector. So Daz, what character have you not created yet? You don't necessarily know this person. This person is a new person. You are breathing life into a brand new character. Write down some attributes that you would like to write about. There we go. You don't know her yet, then this is the exercise for that. Yeah. So we've got somebody that is terrified of bunnies, that is a psych nerd. You know, maybe they're the kind of person that psychoanalyzes everybody they meet. Or, you know, they're constantly got a pen and paper in hand and they're like, ooh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to see whether or not this person is a extrovert or an introvert. Okay. You know, and maybe they do that to everybody. You know what you are? You're an introvert. How can you tell? I've actually known somebody in my life who did that to every single person they met. So I'm just going to let this ad break. Yeah, I think next time what I'm going to do, I think for my next workshop, I am going to make sure that I put the ad breaks in the middle of the sprints so they're not as intrusive. That's what I'm going to do. Okay. Thank you for helping me get to this conclusion. Ba 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 ba. Arrogant, possessive, and obsessive. Okay. What does she like to eat in the morning, Daz? What's her favorite food? How does she prepare a beverage that she enjoys? Blueberries. Ooh, blueberries. Good one. Yeah. She's a lich, so a soul. Okay, so she consumes souls for breakfast. So does she, like, you know, try and find the village idiot as a soul? Or does she go out there trying to find, you know, a wide-eyed 10-year-old's soul because they taste more like ambition and a lack of sense? Does she, you know, like, does she find the crotchety old soul that's 95 years old and living on their last lung? You know, what's her favorite accessory to wear in a chill day? Yeah. Does she feel the cold? You know, maybe she loves the souls in an old folks' home because they taste like failed dreams. I don't know. They taste like, wow, you lived a hard life. You're going to taste delicious. You're so complex. You know, dark. I like it. She needs one soul a year, but more can improve her indebtedness to closer resemble being alive. Okay, so the lich is 120 years old, so she feasts in old folks' homes for the nostalgia. There we go. There we go. We have a lich who enjoys blueberries and old people's souls. And maybe she wears chainmail bikinis because she doesn't feel the cold, and so she's flexing. And because she's a lich and technically not alive, chafing just does not exist. Okay, there we go. Okay. You see where I'm trying to get at, Daz? We are creating somebody new. Now, who are they? What is this person's name? We got bunny-hating psych guy person. We've got this person who is a amateur psychologist. Ooh, Hildegard. Oh, bringing in my Von Bingen. Hey, there you go. So Hildegard, the psych nerd who... Lyra Blue Ridge. Okay, there we go. We've got a name. Blue Ridge is a form of clothing, isn't it? It's a form of something. It's a brand name around here. Emily. I love the idea of a world where everyone wears full armor except the undead who only wear bikini armor. Right? What do I need to worry about the cold for? You know? Okay, so we've got Hildegard and we've got Lyra Blue Ridge. Hildegard, the bunny-hating psych person, and Lyra Blue Ridge, the metal bikini-wearing lich queen who prefers a healthy diet of 85-year-old men who never found their one true love because they taste the most like loss, which is like blueberry ketchup. Here we go. Welcome to a Sapha Burnell workshop. What is their purpose? Bikini armored lady lich. Absolutely. What is their purpose? What is it about this person you think readers will want to discover? And again, this goes back to whether or not you are writing as an author or a writer. If the readers are you, then you know what you like, hopefully, or you're going to figure it out as you keep writing. If your readers are a specific ideal reader, then, you know, what is it they're going to like? This would make an amazing metal band name. Emily, now I want to start a metal band. What is it about this person that you think readers will want to discover? And again, this goes back to our discussion on genre, on expectation, on where we're going from here. So think about that. Start circling in your list what things, or highlighting, or just kind of reading over your list. What things do you think a reader would like to discover? How best can you add an antagonist or foil to highlight what you want to discover? This goes back to the entire purpose of writing a piece of short fiction, which way back in the beginning of this was the question of what do you want your reader to feel, think, or discover by the end of this story? What is it? Well, how can you best find character attributes which bring you back to that initial goal of what you want your readers to discover? How can you now take those attributes that you've created out of this character, this bunny-hating psych nerd, and this bikini-wearing lich queen noshing on great uncle Stephen, never got to be on a second date in his life. You know, what is it that you want your readers to discover? And then when you're creating a foil for that, how can you create a foil or an antagonist that highlights what that discovery is? How that character comes to either discover it or fail in that discovery. And now you get to decide whether or not you want your protagonist, your main character, to succeed or fail. Do you want them to succeed? Do you want them to fail? Do you need them to come to that specific conclusion? Or are they going to reach that discovery point in a different way? Now, this was supposed to be another kind of moment where we're starting to connect your plot vectors to your characters. So I do want you to actually take another few minutes here. I'm going to turn the music back on in a minute. And what I want you to do, I'm just going to put this back up to here for a second. We are going to look at our plot vectors, and we are going to look at these character attributes, and now we're going to start attaching how you can get this character to fit with the discoveries that you want to make with your plot vectors. And then how can you add the antagonist? So Daz, what you're going to do is you're going to take Lyra and you're going to add her in as the antagonist to whatever it is that you want your BBEG to discover within this short story. Okay? We're going to take about 5 minutes for it. Just kind of fast and loose, take a look. And I'm going to be here. Ask away when it comes to questions, and I will be pushing this aside and putting music on. Oh, come on. last minute. All right. Whoop. And there we go. That is our next sprint. With my crazy effing dance moves. And me staring outside my window going, oh my gosh, is it snowing? All right, how are we doing? Now we have, okay, let's see here. We've got Nyx Flare. Hildegard, the psych nerd, is looking for a way to get over their fear of rabbits. In doing so, they get trapped in a rabbit cage at a pet store with no way out. They end up befriending one and adopting it once the employees arrive the next morning. Okay, so we have got somebody locked in a rabbit cage with rabbits. To me, that seems like a horror story. I'm terrified. Flop, flop. No. Maya Randolph mean, woo, you know, just kind of like, run. Oh no. Oh gosh. They'd be wondering where I made those mittens. All right. If you hear little tippity tappities, those are my dog. Yes, hello, buddy. Hello. Yes, you are cute. Okay, so what else do we have here? How are we connecting? How are we connecting the plot vector, the character attributes, and the potential foil or antagonist? What are our thoughts? So for Nyx, we have Hildegard, who is trapped with rabbits, and they're being foiled by their fears. What else do we have? Let's see who else has something here. I'm hoping that Daz has something too. Lyra the Lich is annoyed that not only is one of them beseeching her for the chain, but it's him, one of the magelings. Okay. One of them who? What do you mean by them? And beseeching her for the chain. What chain are you talking about? So you see how with a Nyx Flare, we had a very clear definition and goal in mind. We've got a character, Hildegard, who is terrified of bunny rabbits. And it's probably going to be a fairly psychological short story because they are a psych nerd. And the crux of the plot is this terrified person gets trapped with their fears and has to find a way out of it. And that way out of it for Hildegard is to basically alleviate their fears, to work through their fears in a way where they can confront and then comfort themselves. So you see how in that moment that we've got that night with bunnies, you know, the terror bunnies, we've got a very specific and singular goal. I don't know with Lyra the Lich who them is, what the chain is, what a mageling means to this character. 5 Nights at Fuzzballs. No, I got it. It was a long weekend. Oh my goodness. But you see what I mean, Daz? We are taking a simple plot vector. We are taking something that happens in one moment of time, and we are expressing it. through our characters' wants, dreams, desires, fears, and through that antagonistic foil. Uh, so keep working. Keep working on Lyra. What is a short story that you can tell with Lyra that encapsulates this moment of, what does she want in life? And then what happens? What does the antagonist do to her in that life or unlife? Our main character is our protagonist. This is who the story is about. Yeah. Lyra the Lich is annoyed. A fellow member of the La'ance has come demanding a precious item, and then he breaks the parley with an attack. Okay. Okay, that's better. That's better. But in that moment, what is Lyra active about? This fellow member of the La'ance is doing something to her. What does she want? What does she want? What is her desire? What is her fear? Does she desire to be left alone? To moontan? In her bikini? Lyra the Lich wants something at the beginning of this has nothing to do with the other guy. What is it? And then, of course, we have that Lyra the Lich is defeated in the end, so we know that's going to happen. But what is it she wants? How is she an active character in her own story? So our protagonist, this is the person who the story is about. The person who has the most motion in the plot and comes to the largest realization or has the most to gain or lose. This is also our lens. All right. So Lyra enters this plot wanting to continue reading her book by moonlight while she moon dance. But this, okay. So she has the most to gain or lose because this person is coming in to potentially defeat her. Okay. Our antagonist. Enter a character acting as a foil or potentially a setting, circumstance, or realization or impediment. So with Hildegard, there is a couple of clear circumstantial impediments to getting out of this night without being scared and terrified out of their mind. Hildegard is stuck. They are impeded by their situation. They are locked inside the setting, and circumstances are there surrounded by their fear, and there is nothing else that they can do except be confronted by that fear. That is the antagonist. And then you've got the dialogue inciter or inciters, and that is a character with whom the protagonist can talk, can banter. This could be the antagonist. It could be a bunny. It could be that the character only needs themselves to talk to, This is up to you, but that's it. That's the limit of the cast that you're going to keep for these short stories. You're going to have a main character, an antagonist, and a dialogue inciter. One or two. Everyone else is background noise, even if we're in a crowded place. Otherwise, you're going to overcomplicate it. And overcomplicating something like this is just going to kill it. It's going to kill it before it's dead. Again. In a metal bikini. Trying to moonbathe. All right. Any questions about character? Building character. How to simplify a character. And like I say simplify, I don't mean that the characters have to be surface level. I just mean that for the source of this story, you are dealing with one thing. And like we are complicated beings, we are more than one thing. But for the amount of time that you've got, 2,000 words or so, you're simplifying it into one subject that can be investigated. And anything else goes into a different story. Any questions about character? Anyone? Beeler? Okay, moving on. This has solved one of the problems I have in a story I was struggling with. Yay! Hallelujah! Yeah, well, I saw, this workshop, just a little brief, we've got some time. This workshop came out of some comments that I was seeing in the Stories on Fire Discord server, the creative server that the right team we are in. And it was of people that were, just having a little bit of difficulty figuring out what to do for their short stories. And so I figured that this would be a useful way of kind of to break it down. I think a lot of the time too, we are our own worst enemies when it comes to our work. And we tend to want to overcomplicate things because we've got like 17 worlds in our heads. We've got a lot of complex stuff that can happen. Like, just listen to the way that Daz is communicating in this workshop. There is so much complication there. And that's a beautiful thing because Daz has really thought out all of these incredible plots. But when we're trying to break it down into something that is disseminating in 3,000, 4,000 words, even up top into 7,000 words, you're still only dealing with one concept at a time. And when you're able to just kind of narrow things down and eliminate all of these extraneous bits, it's a lot easier to be more creative. And that's part of it too. I remember, in the slush pile, for the years of it, of always having that comment that the hardest thing to tell somebody as a prompt is do whatever you want. It is so much harder to just be told, well, just go out there and do what you want. Just do what you want. Well, what do you want me to do? Well, I don't know. Just do what you want. Because one, there's usually hidden expectations that are actually there and just not defined. Like, do what you want within a certain amount of terms and words and within a certain genre, within a certain, so it's not really do what you want, but you're just hiding all of those things that I'm supposed to somehow telepathically inherit from your brain. But as a creator, the second that we put foundational guidelines into our work, when it comes to something like a short story, we are closing off enough doorways and windows that we can quiet the noise and concentrate. At least that's the hope. It comes down to something too, for years, there is a place where I would go to do some writing here in my town where I live. And, go there, grab a drink, spend a little bit of time. And I'd get a lot of awesome writing done for the first, X amount of time, the first 40 minutes, the first hour, when the place was fairly quiet. The second all of the after work crowd started coming in and the noise level raises and all of a sudden there's tons of people there, try writing a really emotionally grounded chapter in the middle of a crowded room with everybody and talking in the middle of a party. It's too loud. Even when those characters all live in your brain, you can't listen to anyone without shouting. And then that's where things like tone and mood and pacing can suffer because we are complicating things to the point where we have to shout to ourselves in order to understand what we're trying to do. And when we put... Seriously? Another ad? What the? Okay, whatever. Twitch changed things while I was gone. I don't understand. Okay. When we put kind of blinders on ourselves, when we give ourselves guidelines in which to create something like a short story, we are encouraging the freedoms that we have as creators to push forth in a certain more finite way. And it's kind of like, oh, is that what happened? Okay. Yay, Twitch has increased the amount of ad breaks. You can only spread them out so much now. Woohoo. Okay. Well, 40 seconds. Okay. Doop 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 doo 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 doo. Watch me get copyright struck for Muppet Babies. Who remembers that? That's never gonna see the light of day again. Oh my gosh. Muppet Babies. It's freaking good TV. It's never gonna see the light of day. Muppet Babies will never be seen again. The original Muppet Babies. Hey, Strixline, how's it going? Welcome to our workshop on short fiction. So, like I was saying, one of the reasons why I have titled this workshop Asset Economy, and I have created a printable like this, that, it's a 2-page printable, where you can kind of create the basis of a short story and things like that, is that once we give ourselves stipulations, once we give ourselves kind of a narrowing of field, we can push ourselves to dive deeper into limited things. And that is where we can get some very beautiful character moments. You can get some epic scenes and epic moments and things that will live forever in relatively few amount of words. Again, going back to Unknown Baddie, do you create weekly writing goals for yourself? Yes, I do. I have weekly, monthly, and quarterly writing goals, and I also have a publication schedule that I have to follow for myself and the small press. So, absolutely. And I've got, a few of my writing goals are coming up. I gotta get going on them. But I absolutely do. Covmonia notwithstanding. Don't get pneumonia and then get COVID. Please don't do it. But think of those moments in time that you're reading, that you're experiencing in cinema, or you're reading in a book, or you've experienced during, a TTRPG campaign that really stick with you. And then we're diving into that kind of thing, and then we're giving somebody that, and then we get to kind of, I don't know how you're talking. I'm kidding it. You know how I'm talking? Fisherman's Friends. It's literally Fisherman's Friends. I've had like 7 of them in the 2.5 hours that we've been doing this. I'm like, I'm going to get out of this. I'm just going to stop. My vocal cords are just going to pop out of my mouth and go, no. Anyway, back to it. Kind of going some psychological stuff in here. But no, that's why I like to be very economical with my narrative when it comes to short fiction. Because it is that one moment in time. It is that one experience. It is that one thing. And if you want to tell a longer story, that's fantastic. There are other forms of literature in order to do that, including the novel, or the novel series, or a serial, where you're writing in, say, 3,000 word spurts. There are places to do that. But with short fiction, you are relieved of having to tell an entire universe's story, and all you are doing is staring in the face of a moment. You are looking at a single person and a single place, and you are giving us that person's most important motion, that movement, that essence that will live with us, just like a very old man with enormous wings flying off into the sunset, away from the town that used him. And hello, Atanshi. How are you? I hope you're doing all right. And now we're going to talk about setting. Keep the story contained. It can absolutely happen in a single place. There's nothing that says a story has to happen in multiple places. You do not have to do 7 different scenes for a short story. You can do one scene. You can do one prolonged scene if you want to. If you, enjoying a salad, lovely. If you want to do more than one place, it has to count. There has to be a reason for it. But you don't have to go beyond that one place, that one moment. Keep the story contained. One location helps pare things down so we can focus on what that setting means, how it reflects the protagonist or antagonist's mood, tone, and perspective. If you need more than one place, remain conservative with that amount. Try to keep it to as few locations as you possibly can. Use the setting as symbolic or metaphoric of the protagonist's struggle. How someone interacts with a space tells us a massive amount about their mood, emotional state, personal context, and perspective. This is where solid writing lives. Literally, because it's a setting, it's a place, in a few minutes, we're going to conduct an exercise on setting and perspective versus reality, but this is an important thing to remember. One location helps pare us down. And, the shorter something is, the easier it is to keep to one location. And that's just the way that fiction works. So, if you're writing something that's 2,000, 3,000 words, then you're not writing 7 different places. You're not doing it. If you're writing something that's closer to the 10,000 word mark, well, that's a little different. You have a little bit of wiggle room, but not much, not as much as you think. So if you are moving locations, you need to make it impactful, or you need to combine those places. What is it that you are moving them for? And so here's something that I learned when I was editing through the slush pile over, a decade. Too many settings in a short story tend to become flaccid, underwhelming, cardboard cutouts. They take over too much of the word count because you're constantly having to ground us in another place. And they leave very little room for the character of the plot. And this is why I'm saying really condense down the amount of places that you go, because you want to be able to create a very vivid place. You want to be able to create a mood and tone for the story based on the location you're in. And if you're constantly having those characters move somewhere else, then your readers, one, don't have a chance to breathe and just kind of inhabit an area. Two, your word count is being taken up by purple prose / expositional, this is where we are, it's unless it's very much linked to the character and their perceptions, it's taking away bits of the character and bits of their journey, by just grounding us in yet another room. Why? What is it about that room that we need to go to? What is it about it that suddenly creates a situation where now we know we're in the thick of the story? What is it about that pet store rabbit hutch that foobars so Hildegard gets stuck? We don't need Hildegard. We don't need to see Hildegard at home, and then we don't need to see Hildegard at the coffee shop, and then we need to see Hildegard at work, and then we need to see Hildegard going to the pet shop. Yes, we know that in a common day, Hildegard probably gets up in the morning somewhere at home and then goes to a coffee shop, goes to work wherever, and then ends up, in a pet shop that day. No, we're not telling the story of every day. We're telling a story about the moment Hildegard, given to us by Nick Flair, has gotten stuck in a pet store rabbit hutch. And somehow, through some escaping imagination, has not been able to get out before the pet store is closed for the night and they're stuck. So we only need one place to tell that story. Now, for something like the story that Daz was talking about, where you have the, bikini-clad Lady Lich who just wants to get back to her studying, we don't necessarily need that confrontation between Lady Lich and the big bad guy to happen in 3 different places. We can absolutely have that happen in one location. If you do have a location move, you just have to make it count. If you want to read a really interesting story, if you're okay with horror, and yes, I'm shouting it out again, but Macabre and Monstrous, the story Fell Plumes by Emily Armstrong, that one has one main location, which is Mech and Lark's ship, but you actually see 2 other locations as part of that short story, but those locations are foils. They are in themselves antagonists for Mech and Lark. So that's one way that you can make multiple settings work, but for the most part, try to pare it down. Okay, so we're going to do a bit of an exercise here. So get your pen, paper, or your printable ready, or your, note document. And we're going to write down as many setting locations as we can think of. And now, I feel like I'm singling out Daz, but it's only because I want Daz to get this through her head. Daz, this is not a specific thing that you thought of before this workshop began, where you're like, oh no, I know exactly what this looks like, and here's my document, and here's the Pexels picture that I've already pre-planned. No, this is completely brand new. Write down as many settings as you can think of. Places. any setting that you can think of. You know, it could be anywhere in the universe. Just write down a whole bunch of them. Any place of interest to you. A bar, a bedroom, a field with wildflowers, the night sky, a space station corridor, a walk along a riverbank, the middle of the sea, a bowl of soup, the end of a needle, like a sewing needle. Wherever it is in the universe, it could be that this setting takes place entirely in somebody's head, and inside their head looks like a bunch of golf balls put together by Charles Xavier. You know, where are we? Right, we're going to spend 5 minutes. We're just going to do this fast and furious. We're going to spend 5 minutes writing down as many places as possible that you're interested in. Again, they have to be places you're interested in. There have to be places that you'd actually kind of like, oh, hey, you know what? I'm going to put us in the middle of a can of pink paint. I am the one bit of blue pigment in a can of pink paint. That's what the story is. This story is about blue in the middle of just pink area. Okay, let's see how you do this. All right. let's see where that goes. Kind of interested. What in the world? You know, maybe it's that rabbit hutch. But to start writing down as many places as possible. And in the back of my mind later, we're going to think of how somebody interacts with space. So, where did that go? Yeah, I forgot the 5-minute thing. That's okay. So we're just going to spend 5 minutes. I'm just going to keep talking to you. Just write down a bunch of places. Or, you know, we can even rapid fire it instead of just writing it down for ourselves like that. You know, what are some places that we could go? Just shout them out in the comments. Let's do it. So for that story that Emily was talking about earlier with the automaton that wakes up with zero memories or zero anything except the root home, I'm assuming then that the root home is the setting. So then that setting is going to move over time because I'm assuming that the road is, is it a road? Is it a field? Is it a patch of dirt that you can only find if you know where to look for it? Is it a river? A cult shop? A shower? Ooh, a crater rim of an active volcano. Ooh. Ah. Where else have we got? GameStop. Okay. Oh, mine just closed. Okay. What else have we got? We've got GameStop, Lady Lich's sunroom. Oh. I have got the end of a spoon. Murky water beneath the swamp grass. Okay. Now, we could do that as in just like this is where somebody has a footpath, or we can pretend that these characters are microorganisms inside that murky water. There's tons of things you can do with these images. And so now, when we're thinking up these places, we're going to start thinking of how the character that we created, so, our Lady Lich. We're also going to think of how characters like Hildegard that we were making earlier, how they interact with the space. Oh, a bookstore with a restricted section with a lock that changes every minute. Oh, man. Could you imagine working there and having to restock everything? Microcosms are an awesome amount of fun. You could tell the entire story of the universe on the head of a pin. A story, yeah, no kidding. So how someone interacts with the space indicates mood, emotions, context, and perspective. And this is where we're getting heteroglossic with things. So this is where we're going to save a lot of word count. Because I'm not interested in a kind of third party, cold, the room was pink with white curtains. Personal experience. Okay. Yeah, it would require some fast thinking to unlock it. You know, when we're looking at setting in a short story, we are looking at the perspective and interaction people have in the setting, not necessarily just the setting itself. It's less about, I mean, it can be sometimes you have, setting sketches and mood sketches, which are, explaining a room of one's own. But today we are looking at fiction where it's not necessarily about the fact that, we're on the rim of a crater of an active volcano, but it's about the lack of sweat pouring down Lida's neck because she's dead and just ate a 35-year-old. Like, it is about the light sparking across the sky. It's about those motes of fire that could hit anything and make it burn. It is about how that space is interacted with instead of just the cold explanation of what it is. This is where solid and heteroglossic writing lives, because we are experiencing this space with the main character. Now, this often means that our narrator is going to be a little tighter than a kind of third-person omniscient God at the back of the van filming everything on the webcam. This is going to more likely be something where we are really investigating more into the character. We're more into the mindset of some form of character or some form of item that is inside this thing. So when we are planning a setting, we start with the facts. We, the writers, start with the facts. We write down as many setting locations as we can think of, anywhere in the universe, any place of interest. We write down any setting we connect with. There it is. And then we write down as many identifying factors of the space as possible that our characters can connect to. Now we know what the space is. It is a puddle made by a foot in a mud bank that is full of microcosmic life. It is a rabbit hutch in a pet store run by a bunch of teenagers who didn't realize they needed to check to make sure all of the patrons had left before they went home because, oh man, I want to go see a movie. Let's go. It is that rim of the volcano which should feel hot but doesn't, even though all of these signifiers of heat are present, but the Lich Queen can't feel any of that. What color are the walls? What sort of place is it? What's in the space? What time of day or night is it? What time period are we in? What universe are we in? What is the environment like? Write down as many facts about the space as possible. And then what we are going to do is we are going to connect the dots between facts about the setting and things that your character can interact with. Now, normally this would be a 5-minute sprint, but we've got 4 minutes left in this entire workshop, so I'm just going to let you do this on your own time. We have the facts of the setting. Now we play with the characters' perceptions of the space. How the characters interact with the space is a key method of showing, instead of telling, the interplay of perception and reality. And perception versus reality is an excellent place for a character and a writer to live, because what we're really playing with in the written word is our character's perception versus the reality of the situation. And oftentimes the readers will have a certain amount of the reality of the situation, and a lot of clever writing lives when the reader has a certain amount of the reality that the character's perceptions don't match with. How does the character interact with it? Do they like the space? Is it dim or bright? Is it too out in the open or cramped? Do they have fond memories of this place or horrible ones? I mean, obviously for Hildegard, there's going to be some horrible memories there because there's hippity hoppity bunnies going around and it's like, ah, you know, but build a mood and tone perception of the space from the character's point of view. What is it that that character thinks of this space? How do they feel in it? You know, so many people can enter the same exact space and have completely different experiences. And that's where we can live. Like, you can almost tell the same setting, so time period, moment in time, the same place, in 7 different stories from 7 different perspectives. And each single one of those characters will have a different experience in that same exact space. And that's actually a really fun exercise to do. And if you're looking for something where it's kind of a highlight of your characters or a highlight of your world build, and you want to have something either for Ko-fi members or World Anvil content or, you know, weekly Substack posts and things like that, it's actually a really cool way to do it. Is to write about one moment in time, one setting, or yes, a monthly zine, yeah. Like, or zine month, yeah. You know, you can write about this one moment in time and this one specific place, but every single standalone story is of a different character within that space. You will have 7 completely different stories by the end of it, hopefully. If they're not and they're too similar, then you need to go back to your character attributes and pick different character attributes to make sure that things change. Different ways of interaction. And by the end of that, you have a short story collection. You have something that you could do. You could do a story a day and you could have it done in a week. And of course, there's editing to do. So, you know, obviously it's not going to take you a week to go from start to finish, but a first draft, you can do that. So what you're going to do is you're going to take this setting, and your setting is going to be the absolute main part of your character's perceptions. And you're going to build a mood and tone perception of the space from the character's point of view. Now, this is another really good exercise that if you're trying to get into short fiction and you're trying to do moments in time and things like that and simplify everything, that you can do, just do it from the character's point of view. It could be in first person or third person. It doesn't necessarily need to be in first person. If it's from a character's point of view, you're just within that character's lens. But you're building mood and tone in a space by how they interact with it. And when your exposition is directly linked to the main character's temperament and experience, it makes the setting its own sub-character or presence. And this is how you can get heteroglossic. This is how you can condense things down. This is how you can keep things simple, but complex and vivid. Because you're not just explaining that he walked into a room with pink painted walls and a neon planet, you know, behind the chair. You know, you're building that, like, oh, his eyes stinging at this crazy amount of light inside this Pepto-Bismol pink horrific place that he's somehow supposed to be able to walk into, you know. I wonder if I will need jam to eat his soul after I toast him in the lava. Yeah, that's a good one. But you're making that experience of walking into a place to be the best revelation of character outside of what happens during the conversation and the plot. And so that is a really cool place to live within when you're creating this fiction. And it's a great setting exercise, and it's a fantastic exercise to figure out characters, and to figure out the setting, yes, but to figure out how the character moves inside a space. You know, basically, if you've ever wanted to see how this is done in reality, think of people at a family gathering who are all walking into somebody's kitchen. You know, depending on who that person is in the family, they're going to walk into that kitchen in a completely different way. Some of the people are going to try and walk into the kitchen to get a glass of milk, realize that death is on the line, and back out of there screaming, while half of the women in their family are chasing after them with dish rags, you know, telling them to get away from the baked ziti. Other people are going to walk near the kitchen and get roped in to do some dishes. Other people are going to function within that space in a different way. So there is an infinite amount of variety that can happen within that exact same space. And that's why, again, I say that you can condense the amount of space and spaces you have in your story and still have a tremendous amount of impact. Now, this was going to be a 10-minute sprint, but no. We're coming at the end here, and so I'm going to leave it on this screen, and then we're going to talk about this, and then we're done. And we've got 56 seconds left on this ad break. Twitch, why did you change it on me now? I should have had a different way of looking. I need to stop singing. Someone tell me how. All right. La 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 la. That was an annoying change. Yeah. Yeah. Da 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 da. Ba 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 da 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 do 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 ba da ba do 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 ba da ba do 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 ba da 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 do 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 do. Okay, we're back. All right, sorry about the ads, guys. Normally I try and put ads with sprints and things, but just first day back. Twitch has changed things. Okay, so we are going to close off this workshop with conservation of plot. Again, if you get confused, if things get muddled up, if they get, oh yeah, this is prime time. Yeah, that would do it. If you end up feeling stuck, or you're like, oh, I've got so many ideas and it's just, I don't know where to go with this plot. I don't know where to go with this story. I finished one scene and I don't know how to transition to another scene. Anything like that you're kind of stuck with, go back to the printable or, your worksheet or whatever you're working from. Go back and take a look at your original plot vector. You've got one impetus for motion. You've got one call for equilibrium and one conclusionary moment to make. And if you are finding that whatever you're doing is leading you away from that initial conclusion, that initial desire to answer the question of who are you writing this for and what do you want that reader to feel at the end, if it is taking you away from that moment, then it needs to be modified or erased. Or you need to take it and put it somewhere else. Make it its own story. Maybe that's another moment and another thing. And so really the name of the game is conserving and keeping your short stories simple, standalone narratives where the initial spark of life for that moment is something that we, by the end of it, have some form of resolution for. Even if that resolution is a character staring into the abyss and they are either making a decision or they haven't made the decision yet, there still needs to be enough emotion that that person reading that story feels like they went somewhere with you. And that really is the key to writing short fiction that lives and breathes inside somebody's mind long after they finished reading it. If we are reading things that go nowhere, life goes nowhere for a lot of people. We are living in a paradigm. We are living within a time and space on this planet where there are so many different worldviews that are colliding, but there's also been, for the last 20 years, this pervasive almost loss of clarity. And in my opinion, fiction done in such a way as to really stick with you, it somehow rebels against whatever is happening in the main state. It somehow makes a stand that might be slightly different or look at something in a different way. And we've seen so much fiction if I had to pare down the amount of fiction that I've read as a short story editor and as somebody who worked, again, for, for those of you coming in later on, who worked for 15 years in the slush pile and in literary journal editing and everything like that, if I have to kind of condense down the two main stories that I would see most often, and the two main stories that we got quickly tired of and just moved on from and did not continue publishing, it would be the Life is Meaningless Then You Die stories. And it would be the I'm going to promise XYZ. And then in the end, I'm going to subvert your expectations for XYZ by giving you nothing, by leaving it open. One was just sort of consistently depressing over time, especially you're reading, 70 stories in, however many days it takes to get through that part of the slush pile. And that there's another 140 waiting for you when you're done. And when 3/4 of them are Life is Meaningless, then it takes a toll. It takes a toll on mental health. And there's a lot of like, ooh, synopsis, yeah, nope. Ooh, synopsis, yeah, nope. And just eventually you just end up having to toss a lot of those on the on the slush trash pile, because you just, what are you doing? You can't do it for your own safety, your own health. But you can subvert expectations, and that's okay. A story like Daz's, where we've got bikini-clad Lady Lydia, who, she's got her own expectations of where the story is going to go, and then we know by the end of it something completely different is going to happen to subvert that expectation. But there is still some form of conclusion there. There is still some form of motion that is carried forward on its direction and then has somewhere to go. You have taken your readers somewhere. And that's all you need to do. You just need to take your readers somewhere. You don't need to worry about trying to make them go on a road with you 9 novels long. Because if you took them somewhere and they enjoyed that writing, they will go looking for your stuff. They will, oh, hey, where can I find that person? Oh, they got a website. Oh, hey, look, they've written so many things. Oh my goodness, Connie, let's go get this stuff. Is this on Kindle? Hey, let me take a look. Readers want to read things. They want to enjoy things. Readers will find a way to find your work if they liked it. And so instead of trying to set up 17 different things, you go into every single short story by how you can be precise, economical with your characters, with your narrative, with your direction, concise with your setting. You can play with just a couple of different symbols, maybe a metaphor or two, that's it. And you can give them something that clings to their soul. Then they will follow you down that road. And if it wasn't for them, that's fine. That's totally fine. I would much rather have a situation where somebody goes, yeah, you know what? Your writing's not my thing. And then them leave it at that. Than them trying to lambaste in various reviews saying this was nothing like, I went into this thinking that it was a historical romance novel. It's not a historical romance novel. It's a cyberpunk thing. Like, oh my goodness, there's an artificial intelligence and there's a guy in a spaceship and I just don't understand. Like, this is not historical romance. No, it's not. I'm glad you figured that out now. That's great. I know a couple of historical romance novelists, and I think you'll really like their work. And you get to send them on their way, and then they had a positive experience, regardless of whether or not they were like, oh yeah, that was my thing. And I'm not saying, too, when I was commenting on, the sheer amount of stories that we got, which basically could be distilled down into Life is Meaningless Then You Die. I'm not saying you can't be grimdark. I'm not saying you can't, spend those moments and kind of deal with darker themes. But your editors and your readers still want to go somewhere with you. They don't want to circle around the carpet like a dog trying to get comfortable. They want to know that by the end of it, that they got to experience something that they would never have experienced if they didn't pick up that book or that magazine, or they didn't click that button and they didn't kind of come into something beautiful, something tragic, something incredible that only you can tell. So that conservation of plot is there to help simplify that one moment, that one piece. Because people will search for the whole if they enjoyed the moment. And I hope that helps. I hope that kind of alleviates a lot of stuff, especially for those of us who are using short fiction as a way to get people interested in larger works, or to get people interested in, say, a world build that they're working for something like World Anvil or a TTRPG, or they're trying to be heteroglossic. If you are writing content for something like a Substack or Ko-fi, or, you know, some form of, you know, you do one story a month, one story a week, one story of this, that, and the other thing, then this will help simplify things down. If you are interested in something like novellas or novelettes, do let me know, and I will do a specific workshop on those. I know some people are interested in flash fiction, which is under 1,500 words. I did the condensed workshop, so I actually do have a workshop specifically on flash fiction, and I can run that at any time. You just have to let me know. That one's already ready. It's already in the it's already in the folder. And I want you to take a look at what you've done today. And I'm going to take a drink in a second, but I want you to take a look at your worksheet, or at your plans, or even just at your work in general, and what you need to do, what you want to do. Where is your emotion? What trajectory is your main character on? I want you to think about that for a second while I take a drink of water. Where's your emotion? What is the thing that gives? Is it that moment that Hildegard can breathe? When there's a bunny that kind of like sits on their feet and doesn't immediately chew off a toe? Is that motion the entrance of that dude through the door, that annoying asshole who yet again wants my MacGuffin, but no. And then no is not the answer that this asshole will take. Well, I'm going to have to show him something. What is the motion? Is the trajectory this automaton's search for home? Is the automaton aware of identifying with anything other than home? What is your motion? What is your trajectory? What is it do you want your readers to think or feel? You have to give them something. How few steps until they get there? This is going to influence the length of your story. Leave the complexity for novels and novellas. A well-crafted, brief narrative has maximum and massive impact for this kind of thing. How few steps until checkmate? How few steps, how few places, how few characters until this person comes to a certain realization, or, you know, takes a bunny home as a pet? Think of how many steps you actually need to get there. And I know that with a lot of short fiction writers I've seen at the start of their short fiction career, there has been this idea that the longer a piece is, the better it is. And that's just not true. Write the piece as long as you need to and then stop. It's okay if you're like, well, I wanted 10,000 words because I wanted to do XYZ with it. It's okay to have goals like that. But if the narrative can't sustain that length, then that's okay. Instead of packaging maybe one short story for a 99-cent ebook, maybe you're going to do two. And keep to the assets. Hello, Blueberry Bean. How are you? How is it going? You're vibing? Excellent. Welcome to the vibe. We're just finishing up on this workshop, so we're going to keep to the assets. Go back to your essence. Go back to who the main character is, what they're there for. What is the point? And again, I'm holding up the printable that I made for you. There's actually 2 pages to the printable. There's the one that starts with plot, vector, character, and setting. And then the second page is character and setting. So putting them 2 together. And then there's a space for other scribbled notes. But regardless of whether you had the printable or not, who is your character? What is it about them you want people to see? Where do they have to be where what you want people to see is best reflected? If the hallway of the place that they're employed at is not the optimum place for them to come to the realization that they hate their job, where is it? Is it inside their office? Is it at the reception desk? Is it at the water cooler? Is it in the bathroom when they're trying to wash a dish or fix their lipstick? Where is it? Where is that optimal place that will be the foil for the character that you are trying to portray, for that moment in time that you are trying to capture? Give us that. And then let it go. Give us that moment and then put the pen down. Once that moment is present, there it is. Whether it is 1,600 words or 9,000 or over 9,000. Sorry. Thought of Dragon Ball Z there for a second. But go back to that initial idea and that initial vector and use that as your star. Use that. Over 9,000. Sorry, I just have Vegeta in my head. Kakarot! Over 9,000! What? I'm also wearing weighted training clothes. Whoa! Merman! Yay! Jute's back! So maybe we do have that initial plot point. Can you be any more cool? Maybe you have that initial plot point of a man on a fishing boat in Alaska who falls over the side. And then we find out that that man is a merman. And then we discover what happens to mermen in winter in Alaska. And then once we've figured out what happens in winter to mermen in Alaska, we're okay. We're done. Let it go. Let it be. Let it be. Let it be. I love that song. And this is the quote from earlier. Nyx Flare got it, so do make sure you hit me up on the Discord server, and I will throw in a ebook as a prize. So, since brevity is the soul of wit, and tediousness the limbs and outward flourishes, I will be brief. And this is from Hamlet. And basically, for those whose Shakespeare is a little bit rusty, it's saying that writing a story short, writing a story with fewer words, fewer concepts, condensing it down, consolidating and being economical with your narrative and the things that go in the narrative, that is the soul of wit. That is a place where the intellect in your mind, where your creativity can thrive for a small period of time, which can then have an incredible impact to everything else that you do. Some of the stories that have formed culture from the beginning of time till now are short. Think about them. Think of how long it takes to tell a mythological story, an Aesop's fable. Think of how long it takes to tell a story that can shake somebody. It doesn't have to be a novel. It can be, and novels are wonderful, but we can give meaning to this world. We can help people come away with something, whether that something is a psychological thought or a philosophical paradigm shift, or whether it's the giggles because that story was hilarious and they really needed that in their day. That's fine. That's great. If you are writing solely to entertain people, that's wonderful. We need that. We need that more than you freaking realize. If in the literary journal scene, there were more stories that were just flat out entertaining, that would have made most of the editors that I know lives a lot less miserable. Never discount an entertaining story. If what you want the readers to think and feel is giggles, laughter, and then go for it. Have fun with that. Just let it be hilarious. Give yourself the giggles while you write, and then hope that somebody else also gets the giggles when they read it. But if you want to impact the world in a different fashion, that is okay too. But just remember, once you've told that main point, leave. The readers will find you if they want you. And there is no greater marketing than a short story that continues to live and breathe, than a character who lives inside someone's head long after they've finished that story. We do not have time today for revisions. I will have to do another workshop about editing and revisions. So if you're interested in that, please join the Discord server, Beautiful Machines. Please let me know. Again, comments are helpful. I don't know what to give you when it comes to workshops unless you tell me what you're interested in. It's flat out. This has been Asset Economy, a short fiction workshop by myself, Sapha Burnell. I would absolutely love your support. If you have the ability to support me, there's a few ways to do it. Number one, follow me on social media, on X, Threads, Instagram, on this beautiful platform of Twitch. You can find me on YouTube at Sapha Burnell. You can also find us at We Aren't Dead Yet. That's another social media platform that I can see. You can also talk to your local public libraries about bringing in my books. That's a great way to support me. That is a great way to support the small press. If you are financially able, I do have Substack, Ko-fi. I also have books that you can purchase. You can go to saphaburnell.com for my entire catalog, and you can also support me via, Ko-fi tips, purchasing the printable and the PDF from today. You can also go on Substack. I have a paid Substack and free as well. And share my work. Let people know that I'm here, Those are ways that you can help support what I am attempting to do here. And yes, I am slowly losing my voice, so I should probably go. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. And for those of you who are Twitch subscribers, Ko-fi members, Substack subscribers, this VOD will be available for you. For those of you who are not Twitch subscribers and things like that, then there will be some time before the VOD will be available, unless you have purchased the PDF and printable, and then the video will be made available for you anytime you want, so you can rewatch this VOD at any point in time. And then I will be here the first Thursday of every month to do another workshop. So if you want to help me figure out what workshop is next, you have to be in the Discord server. So please join the Beautiful Machines Discord server. And if you want anybody to see this, please share it, shout it out. All right, we are going to find somebody to raid while I try and recuperate my voice. And I can't believe I didn't use my BRB screen. I made a new Be Right Back screen and we didn't even use it. Like, okay. I just kept talking. That's what normally happens with me. Alrighty. Let's see who is doing anything to do with writing right now. Let's see, the calm scribe is up. Let's do the calm scribe. Let's do it. Okay. I'm in Sapha. I know some people are in an ad break right now. Right as I was like, yes, let's go. It was like, oh, look, another ad break. Twitch, really? I'm trying to leave. Ah! Oh my goodness. Oh, okay. Let us have a good one. And I will see everybody next week, next Thursday. All right. I'm taking tomorrow off, in other words. Because I got to rest my voice. All right.